All right, good evening, everyone. We're going to call the meeting to order. It's the Bridgewater Township Zoning Board of Adjustment, August 13th, 2024, regular meeting. Both adequate and electronic notice of this meeting specifying the time, place, and manner in which such notice was provided in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10:4-6. Specifically on January 9th, 2024, proper notice was sent to the Courier News and the Star Ledger and filed with the clerk at the Township of Bridgewater and posted on the Municipal Bulletin Board. Please be aware of the Zoning Board of Adjustment policy for public hearings. No new applications will be heard after 9:30 p.m., and no new testimony will be taken after 10 p.m. If you're able, please rise for the salute to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Probst, good evening. If we could have a roll call, please.
Chairman Foose.
Here.
Wiley.
Here.
Mrs. Amin. Here. Mr. Sweeney. Absent. Mr. Fresco.
Here. Oh, no problem.
Mr. Von.
Here.
Mr. Gajewski.
Here.
Mr. Seacat.
Here.
Mr. Kulak.
Here.
Mr. Vessia will be absent for rendering. Mr. Gabbett.
Here.
For the board, Mr. Aller, Mr. Burr, Ms. Sarman, or President. Proceed.
Thank you. At this time, I'm going to open up the meeting to any members of the public that would like to speak on any land use issue which is not on our agenda this evening. All right, seeing none, I'm going to close that portion. And we have board minutes for tonight. We have none. And Rich, why don't you take us through an update on the cases that are coming up?
So we have several things on the agenda. There's only one matter on that's being heard this evening. That's 821 Bridgewater LLC and Jewish Community Center of Somerset, Hunterdon and Warren. That will be heard later this evening. The other matters that are being carried are the matter with respect to CX Towers. That's being carried till right now, September 10th. There will be a new notice with respect to that application. The Starbucks application is being carried to August 27th. That's already been announced, properly noticed, so there'll be no further notices with respect to that application. The application for 1200 Route 22 Land Investors and 1200 Route 22 LLC Holding is being carried to October 8th. And again, there will be a new notice issued with respect to that application. And Belly Holdings is being carried to December 10th of this year, and that will also have new notice for that hearing date.
Thank you, Rich. We have a couple resolutions we're going to work on. Let's work in reverse order. Let's do Chimney Rock last. First up, why don't we do Welsh, Eileen Welsh. Looking for corrections, comments.
So I do have one that's on top of page 5 that indicates that the board took action on the application. The correct date should be June 25th, 2024.
All right, anything else? If I could have a motion, please.
I move.
Mr. Widley and Mr. Bongiorno is the second.
Mr. Foose.
Yes.
Mr. Wiley.
Yes.
Mrs. Amin.
Yes.
Mr. Fresco.
Yes.
Mr. Bongiorno.
Yes.
Mr. Gajewski.
Yes.
Mr. Seacat.
Yes.
Next up, let's do Venkateswaran. I think I got it right, Rich.
Better you than me.
Looking for board comments, corrections, please.
So the only comments I have on that one from any member is that page 2, paragraph 5, instead of Mr. Dar, it should be Ms. Dar. And that runs through probably page 2 and 3.
Okay. If there's nothing else, can I have a motion, please?
I move.
Mr. Widley? Second. Mr. Bongiorno, second.
Mr. Foose.
Yes.
Wiley.
Yes.
Mrs. Amin.
Yes.
Mr. Fresco.
Yes.
Mr. Bongiorno.
Yes.
Mr. Gajewski.
Yes.
Mr. Seacat.
Yes.
All right, next up is Andrew and Mary Sack, 273 Hancock Avenue. Looking for comments and corrections, please.
So the one that I have on bottom of page 6, with respect to conditions, it will just indicate at that very last line, indicating the plot plan or grading plans must be at a scale no greater than 1 inch equals 50 feet.
Nothing else? Can I have a motion, please?
I move.
Mr. Wadley, Mr. Bongiorno.
Mr. Fuss?
Yes.
Mr. Wadley?
Yes.
Mrs. Amin?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney? Sorry. Mr. Fresco?
Yes.
Actually, I have Mr. Fresco marked as absent for this one. Disregard. Mr. Bongiorno?
Me? Yeah. Yes.
Mr. Gieske?
Yes.
Mr. Seacat?
Yes.
Thank you. And last up, we have Chimney Rock Self-Storage LLC. Looking for comments, corrections. And Rich, could you just clarify that we had in there during the case that they wouldn't use forklifts? And I read this, I didn't see it. Is it in there?
Page 15, 18, and 24.
I'm sure I missed it.
Yeah.
I did see it. Page 9. Number 23.
Page 15 is
Yeah, I know, he's asking.
23? There will be no forklifts on site.
That's what it is.
Page 9 of 29. Thank you, Mr. Rodelli.
Yeah, but I would add that into the conditions as well.
That's where I went first. We're going to make a change. We're going to add that to
We'll add that as a
conditions.
condition, yes.
Any other changes, corrections? Have a motion, please.
I'll move.
The usual.
Mr. Fuss?
Yes.
Mr. Wadley?
Yes.
Mrs. Amin?
yes.
Mr. Fresco?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Gieske?
Yes. All right, so we're going to move on to our applications. I see Mr. Coakley here. Good evening, sir. Good to see you. Good. We have 821 Bridgewater LLC and Jewish Community Center of Somerset, Hunterdon, and Warren.
Thank you. Good evening. Good
Evening, sir.
Chairman, council, good evening. Members of the board, it's our pleasure to be here this evening. With me is my colleague, Ryan Benson. I helped put together this application. We have him to blame for it. And also with us is Howard Cohen. Howard is the individual personal counsel to the Jewish Community Center of Somerset, et cetera.
You're Mr. Cohen? Hi, sir.
Okay, here he moved around. So we're here for somewhat of an unusual application. It's an application for 4 use variances, 2 D1 variances, a D4 FAR variance, and a D5 density variance. This property has been kicked around for a long time. It's had many people look at it. It's a 15-acre property comprising 2 lots owned by the Polyachik family. They have gone into contract with 821, whose principal is Joseph Forgione. And the purpose of their agreement is to develop 64 townhouses on part of the 15... What was the number? 64. Yeah, 64 townhouses on a 12-acre portion of the lots 45 and 46, and to be able to convey the 3-acre portion to the west that adjoins the JCC property to the Jewish Community Center for use in connection with their existing programs. So both of those transfers are contingent upon getting all necessary approvals, including the approvals from this particular board. So Mr. Cohen and the 821 folks got together and made this transaction, and that's why we're here this evening. While this is a Section 76 bifurcated application, there's a tremendous amount of information that has been gathered about these properties and this project. Your staff did a great job of eliciting additional information about the property. And we've done a lot of work. We've done a grading plan, we've done DEP permitting and reviews. We've done architectural layouts. We've done stormwater management. So the plan that you're going to get, and it's a use variance application, the plan that you're seeing now is the plan you will get on site plan and subdivision approval. It's locked in. I'm not saying there might be a footer here or there or something like that, but you're getting 64 townhouse units. That's what the variance is for. And there's plenty of information that would justify that's a doable project in this instance.
Mr. Coakley, if I can interrupt you. At our last meeting, we had an applicant, a developer, come in, and they wanted to do a bifurcated application, which is absolutely their right, and it's your right as well. They did not provide nearly the quantity of information you have provided, and this board felt that it was too intertwined with the D1 variance to proceed, and we actually told that applicant, we can't hear you because we can't make a decision based on the information that's been presented. In your professional opinion, have you provided this board with enough information for us to make those intertwined decisions?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, in this case, the decisions are not intertwined. This project stands on its own. It's not related to anything else. And the two cases that the staff cited, have no pertinence here. One was a bus parking area, and they didn't provide an access road to the bus parking area. You can see why maybe that variance was not granted until they filed for site plan approval. The other case, the court reversed the local board because the local board failed to grant the variance. So, it's a very unusual circumstance for a board to deny a decision on a bifurcated application. That doesn't mean you're approving it, but not to grant the decision. The other thing I think to keep in mind is, as this goes on, this would come back to the board for site plan, subdivision, C variances, and the board would review those various approvals just as if they were reviewing the negative criteria for a use variance. So all of those characteristics that come in the subsequent review are subject to a heightened scrutiny. So I mean, in terms of protecting the public's interest, when you get it again, you have, it's sort of open season, I have to admit that. But I think most boards, if they would grant a variance, are going to stand behind it if it's been sustained in terms of the proof. In terms of the JCC, the JCC needs 3 acres. It needs it for its existing programs. And as to the property to be conveyed to it by 821, there is a house that's going to be used for JCC office purposes. There is a barn that's going to be used for storage purposes. And the bulk of the property is open space. It's a cleared area that's going to be used for recreational purposes of existing JCC programs. JCC runs extensive summer camps and extensive programs for children and young adults. And they simply need some more room for those programs, and that's why they really desperately need this 3 acres property. So that's the
6 acres for games and
3 acres of the 15 acres that are being purchased from Polyachek will be used for a house that's on the property now, a barn that's on the property now, and for use of the cleared area for the recreation area for children.
okay, thank you.
Okay, so that's what's planned by the applicant. If anyone has any questions about what the program is, so those are the use variances sought. The FAR variance is sought as a result of the D1 variance, because if you allow the use sought in the D1 variance, it automatically brings about the application of the FAR and density variance. So in the law, sometimes they are subsumed within the D1 variance. They're part of part of it. You get all of it if you get any of it. When the C variances that are not going to be decided, all are as a result of the fact that if you have a D1 variance for townhouses and the existing zone is based on single-family housing, you know, the zone is going to engender a lot of variances. They would be dealt with on site plan approval and subdivision approval. But they kind of, because I think one of the questions was, why can't you adhere to like the FAR standards? Well, those standards were not meant for this type of project. This is a townhouse project, not a single-family residential project. So you'll hear testimony from Laura Friedman for the JCC, who is their executive director and chief operating officer, and is really the heart of the JCC. And she'll tell you about what the JCC does and how it operates in its current facility, how long it's been there, and that sort of thing, to support an inherently beneficial use variance for that property. Inherently beneficial use because we're taking 3 acres and we're adding it to the JCC property, so that's why it's being added to and needs its own variance. Now, the JCC property is zoned for house of worship use, but it's not on the particular streets. There's 4 or 5 streets in the municipality, plus county roads and state roads, that automatically get the right to have a house of worship. And unfortunately, the JCC is not on one of those streets. 202 is one of those streets, obviously, it's a state highway, but it's not directly on 202. So it needs a use variance to expand its use, even though it seems perfectly obvious that it's an addition to inherently beneficial use. So she will be the first witness.
So, Mr. Coakley, you're going to present a case with 64 townhouses that you're going to try and convince this board is inherently beneficial.
No.
Okay.
No,
That's what it sounded like.
2 variances.
Gotcha, okay.
Okay, one D1 variance for the JCC, inherently beneficial use.
Right.
A D1 variance and related D4 and D5 variances for the 64-unit part of the program, you know, as being a particularly well-suited, satisfying the special reasons test. And so there'll be a planner, Peter Steck, who I think has been before the board before, who will testify as to how that use meets the criteria of the Medici case. So that's a separate. So there's really two main cases. There's Medici on the particularly well-suited, and then there's the inherently beneficial case law. That's different. So those witnesses will start, and then following, well, Mr. Steck will come last, but our second witness will be the 821 witness, and we'll be basically telling you how this transaction came about. You know, it's a pretty unusual transaction where you've had a property that's been kicked around for all these years. It's sort of in a zoning quandary. And Mr. Joe came forward with this application and hooked up with Mr. Cohen of the JCC, and they made this agreement to split the property in the way that I've described, 3 acres to 12 acres. And there's good reason to do that. There's good reason not to build single-family homes on this 15-acre property. And there's very good reasons to build age-restricted housing that will be, that it's in dire need in the local community. So you'll hear testimony, you'll hear some business testimony as well as to why he's here. And I described the role of Mr. Steck. Eric Keller will testify on traffic. Basically, yeah, the 64-unit project generates almost no traffic. It's indiscernible, according to him. So you'll have that testimony, and I think that's one of the most apt issues regarding whether or not there's off-site negative criteria. It's on a state highway. no question we'll get a state permit, state highway permit to develop that property it's actually a subdivision permit. And there's almost no traffic generated, no additional traffic generated by the JCC. The JCC is a light traffic generator. It has heavy traffic at a couple of times a day during the summer camp period, where they bring buses in, they manage those buses, they have people carefully adjusting how they move and get in and out of there and don't stop traffic on the adjacent roadways. So Mr. Keller will testify, and so that's the essence of it. There'll probably be one additional witness. Mr. Rob Michello will testify concerning the general situation with the property, the environmental issues, the permitting, the stormwater, and all of those things that really help to tell you that 64-acre plan is a plan that's not going to change. That's what you're voting on the use variance tonight. It's not guesswork. So those are the principal parts that you'll hear this evening. I think this is an opportunity for the board to do two very good things. One is to allow the JCC to expand, which is critical to them, and they are in need of extra space to handle their clientele at the present time. And the JCC, as you'll find out, it's a Jewish-run organization, but it's not limited to Jewish people of a Jewish religion. Has a very wide ambit of people who are interested in the JCC. And as far as the Polyatchik property, it's been up for sale for a dozen years. People have come and gone and looked at it and didn't acquire it. This is an opportunity to give that property fair zoning and move forward with it. And not only do that, but move forward with an age-restricted use that would be beneficial to the local residents. The local residents don't want to leave Bridgewater. They want to stay in Bridgewater, but they don't want to have a place to go that's extremely expensive, that's not near anything. They want to stay near to their family and friends and institutions and organizations. That's what the purpose of having age-restricted housing here is. And so that is what will be testified to.
Are they targeting?
55.
55.
Right. So the Mount Laurel issue was raised. If you give a variance for the 64 units, that will be an inclusionary development. And it will subject the property to the 20% set aside in the Bridgewater Township Mount Laurel ordinance. That can be satisfied in several ways. It can be satisfied by off-site, on-site, or by a in lieu contribution. Bridgewater has a judgment of repose, which means that they've satisfied all of their affordable housing obligations. So our expectation, and this is after some discussion, but nothing binding or anything like that, is that a in lieu contribution will be an acceptable means of resolving that obligation. And so that is the plan. So we are subject to the ordinance, and we can satisfy the ordinance in several different ways, which we will.
Just so that
Yeah.
I'm clear, because I'm just a little confused. Are you saying the affordable housing numbers, you're going to make a contribution to the affordable housing fund rather than put up affordable housing?
Yes. That's allowed by the Bridgewater Affordable Housing Ordinance.
We have to come up with about 800 units by July of next year.
Starting July through 2030?
Yeah. So we're looking for affordable housing units.
Let's let Catherine chime in here on what the next phase looks like for Bridgewater.
Mr. Coakley is correct that Bridgewater Township does have a judgment of compliance proposed for the third round. The fourth round is impending. The process for that round is starting in January. We're going to have numbers attached and obligations provided by the DCA sometime at the end of this year, and then,
And I won't hold you to it, but we've heard numbers from 650 to 850.
and I won't speak on those because it's completely unknown what the number will be. We know we probably will have a number and an obligation moving forward. Our immunity from that judgment of compliance from repose ends June 30th, 2025, so less than a year from now, and our housing elements and fair share plans are due to be revised, including a plan for the fourth round in January of next year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you be in favor of maybe setting aside a few houses for affordable housing?
No, because we believe that making an in lieu contribution and allowing the municipality to have the subsidy that comes with that for affordable housing is a better way to achieve significant amounts of affordable housing than a couple of units here, a couple of units there.
Get the case started, and, we don't want to get hung up on this out of the
Okay.
gate. But, Mr. Cook, if you're not finished, I don't want to interrupt you. I do want to talk about safety and stormwater management, and Mr. Michello from Gladstone has been in front of this board many times, and he's a good witness.
Right.
And I'm very excited to hear from members of the JCC. My kids went to Camp Roush, and it's a wonderful facility and does the community great benefit. But I'm going to tell you, and I tell this to every developer that comes in front of this board, is safety is paramount. If you look at a kind of a logistical layout of me just as one voter on the zoning board, safety comes first. During the storms we've had in the past 5 years, we literally had residents picked up from Route 22 and their bodies are dumped at the train station in Bound Brook. I don't know what the situation is at your site, but some of these things that have happened in our town make us extremely aware, and we want to be very careful in how we develop properties. So he's witness number 4, and you can do whatever order you like, but just speaking for myself, safety is a big deal. We've got a lot of residents here in the seats, probably from West Foothill and Talamini. There's some velocity question marks that come off this property. So I just want to put that to you. I say it to every developer
Let
when
me
they come
do
in here.
this. Let me, without waiving my right, let me just bring up Ms. Friedman for about 2 questions and then bring Mr. Michello up.
I didn't want to sidetrack you. I just wanted to let you know.
That's okay. I just want to have a testimony on the record as to what the variance is for.
And you're always very responsive, and thank you in advance. Whenever you've been in front of the board, you always address these issues. I just feel like I need to say it, because if I don't say it, another applicant is going to say I treated you different.
Okay.
I do want to stop you for just a moment, if I may. For the sake of clarity, your law firm represents both parties that are on this application?
Yes.
And you had introduced a host of attorneys that are present here, and some of whom will be offering testimony, or they will be?
No attorneys. Mr. Benson is my colleague.
Yes.
With the same office. Mr. Cohen is the in-house, or not in-house, but he's the personal counsel.
Yes.
For the Jewish Community Center.
Okay.
There are certain expert witnesses here who are not likely to testify, but who have worked for the JCC in prior occasions.
Okay, thank you. And the other question was, because this application comes to us and you're looking for specific D variances, if one part of this proposal somehow is tied to the other, in other words, the whole package has to be approved.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, one question also, just while we're on it. Mr. Coakley, I'm quoting you. You said there's a zoning quandary. Can you just elaborate? What do you mean, just as we kick this case off? We've got a lot of eyes here. What do you mean by a zoning quandary?
Well, you have a property that has been vacant for a long time. It's underutilized as a farm use.
There is a resident in the home, though. There's a
There is, but
single-family house, right?
It's a 15-acre property.
Right.
There's two homes on the property, so it's not fully utilized, I might say. And there've been lots of people who have come by and looked at that property, and no one has ever bought it. And back in 1990, the last master plan in Bridgewater called for this property in this area to be developed for multifamily housing, but that has never happened either. So that's what I'm speaking of when I say a quandary.
All right.
Okay. All right, Ms. Friedman, could you just come up for 1 second, please?
swear everybody in?
Let's do one at a time as they come up. So would you raise your right hand, please? You solemnly swear that the testimony you'll give to this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. And for the record, would you state your name, spell your last name, please?
Speak in the microphone, please.
It's Laura Friedman, Friedman. Friedman, pronounced Friedman.
Thank you.
Ms. Friedman, have you been here for the opening statement?
Yes,
All right. Anything I say about the JCC, is any of it inaccurate?
no,
Okay. Your organization is seeking a use variance this evening, correct?
correct.
What are the specific purposes of that use variance? In other words, you're going to use this 3-acre property for what?
For the existing program we have so far. So we have a camp with about 650 children, so we want to be able to spread them out a little bit. We have a preschool, we have a special needs program, so all the programs that we have already, just so that we have more space to use. They are outside a lot, nature. That's it.
And there's a house you're going to?
Yep, on the same property, there's a home that we hope to move the camp office to in the summer, in the winter, we would hope, in the fall, in the spring. We would hope to use it for adult classes in the evening, special needs program can use it. It's extra space, in addition to what we have now.
And there's a barn, you're going to
We'd
use
be
that?
thrilled to have the barn, because we have, for storage purposes, the
And,
pole barn.
And if the variance, the use variance is granted, your organization will return to this board and seek site plan approval and subdivision approval, et cetera.
Yes,
All right, no more questions.
Can I just ask, what is your position with,
I'm the CEO.
and for how long?
So I've been at the JCC since they opened their doors in 1999, but I've been doing this position since 2013.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Coakley, the JCC would have to come back in front of the planning board, no, for subdivision?
No.
They would come here?
Under the statute, excuse me,
Because we're granting the use variance, we would grant the subdivision?
yes.
Okay, all right. Does the board have any questions?
Can I ask, what is the current use now for that 3-acre property?
It's part of a farm.
So it's farm use.
There's a house that has been, at least in the past, a residence, and a barn that has storage in it.
So farm or single-family home? Farm?
Yeah, there's, on the property, all told, which is 15 acres, there are 2 homes and several barn-type structures.
And
Most of them will come down.
I'm just trying to understand what can be developed without a variance. So,
What could be developed on the 3 acres without a variance?
yes.
Single-family housing.
Okay, that's what I wanted to understand. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other board questions for Ms. Friedman? Members of the public, questions on the testimony from Ms. Friedman? All right, seeing none. Oh,
Raise your hand.
oh, come on up. What's that? You can just, wherever you're comfortable. Hi there, if we can just have your name and address, please.
Lori Ritchie, 771 Talamini Road.
Okay.
So I'm a house away from the JCCs. They've been wonderful. I'm just wondering, the 3 acres, is it staying greenland, or is it going to be developed in any way, blacktop, anything like that?
No.
Okay.
There's west picture,
Yeah, I didn't get any map or anything with my letter, so,
2 big fields and a little pond, a house and a pole barn.
okay. And are we just addressing that? Because I'm concerned about the construction of the 64 units. I'm literally right on Talamini, they're behind
I
me.
hear you, and this is the way that the cases typically go, is that we have witnesses come up, and members of the public can ask questions of the witness on their testimony. So Ms. Friedman didn't testify on anything with the 64, but I promise you, I'll make you aware when those applicants speak. And then at the end, I'm going to let anyone, for as much time as they want, speak for or against this case at the very end. So thank you for coming, and I'll make sure that you're able to ask questions of the witnesses. Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, please.
Jeanette Sipe, 812 Summit Ridge Drive in Bridgewater.
Could you spell the last name? Sorry.
Pardon?
Spell your last name, please.
S as in Sam, E-I, P as in Peter.
What was the street?
812 Summit Ridge Drive, Bridgewater, New Jersey. A longtime resident of Bridgewater, as you can tell. I'm quoting from New Jersey, NJ.com online. I guess it's tied into the Star Ledger. They mentioned this development, they call it the Venue. It's 64 townhouses. I believe it's for seniors, is that
Ms.
correct?
Sype, right now, it's only questions for this witness on what she testified
Oh, I'm
about.
sorry, and you're with the JCC? Okay. I really don't have any questions for you. I think a Jewish house of worship
Well,
would be pretty appropriate.
after they testify about the proposal and the 64 units,
I'll
you
be
can
back.
come up and ask them about that.
And the reason that we're such sticklers on procedure is because at some point, if someone doesn't like how I did or Rich did or the board did, they can take this to a court. And everything that we say, including your questions, will go in front of a judge. And that's why we have to kind of keep this procedurally by something called the MLUL. It's Municipal Land Use Law. So they kind of dictate how we run these meetings and how the format has to be. So I promise, and if I screw up, Rich will poke me over here, but you will definitely be a participant in this meeting and be able to ask questions. All right. Ms. Friedman, I think you're finished. Thank you very much. Oh,
Sorry.
that's my fault. See?
Can you just describe what uses are currently on the JCC site? More so, you need the microphone.
You take the microphone and
The uses that are on the site,
So we service 0, meaning babies, all the way to seniors, or however old you might be fortunate to get. We have a preschool, we have a camp, we have an after-school program, we have a swim team, we have basketball leagues, we have a special needs program where 31 special needs adults come daily. We have senior programming, we have senior fitness programming, we have pools, we have a swim club, we have fitness, we have a tremendous amount of Jewish programming. If you want, I can go into details.
I'm more just trying to look at more of a technicality, and this is probably more for the attorney and for our board, but they're seeking a use variance for a house of worship, and I just want to make sure, because I heard a lot about programming. So my real question is there presently any kind of worshiping or service, like temple services?
Sure. So Fridays, which is Shabbat, we have preschool services, we have a Shabbat service in our hallway. For camp, every Friday there's Shabbat services. So those are the services that we have. Every holiday is celebrated. We actually run the township's Hanukkah program. We bring in Israel culture, so through them, all the Jewish holidays, Yom HaTzmaut, Yom HaZikaron, all the holidays that happen in Israel, so that's the Jewish aspect. Adult Jewish courses, we run Jewish Life, which is a Jewish program in the community that basically brings in authors and educators. We have a Jewish educator on board. Our staff, we have an Israeli Shlicha, which is a person who comes here, an ambassador from Israel for 2 years, who works with us as well, doing Jewish and Israeli education.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I only bring that up because we're in the confines of a use variance. I want to make sure we're capturing everything so that any approval that this board grants will then protect, that use in the future, rather than if we are saying a term like house of worship, I want to make sure that that's not the connotation that they're building a new house of worship on this portion of the site, that it's going to fall under the use that they're seeking. The house of worship under the conditional use section does include that houses of worship have ancillary social events, recreational activities, convocations, and similar. So it captures those things. So it's not just, the definition for house of worship isn't just for a place where religious services are held. It includes other community activities and social activities. But I just wanted to make sure that was captured as this board is considering the use variance.
I think it's an important point, and the courts have been clear that accessory uses are houses of worship, essentially, and we really can't delineate between the two, and they both fall under the house of worship context in every way, shape, and form.
And that's why our ordinance reads that way, and I just wanted to make it clear that we are
I'm glad you got it
capturing
on the
all these
record.
events within that house of worship use. In particular, the ordinance says it says planning board, but this board shall note any of these other activities. And that's just to make sure that we're protecting any kind of use variance approval moving forward, if they ever had to come back or anything like that, that we've captured those other social events, other recreational activities in there.
Why don't I just ask you the question then for the benefit of the public, is that, in your opinion, is this a house of worship and is it appropriate use that they're seeking based on that house of worship definition that you just mentioned?
Yes, and I would just make the the board should, it's my recommendation that they should include all the testimony we heard tonight about those other activities so that it's captured.
Can I taught two really important things. Was our Holocaust Memorial Education Center, which it's the only one in this area, as well as in times of need, we run all the Jewish vigils in the area. So when there was an attack on Jews around the world, we have them, we coordinate it with the synagogues.
Thank you. And I don't think we're going to go into those specifics, which I appreciate the testimony. I appreciate knowing more about it. I think it's very helpful. I think that the board will more generally capture that there are social, recreational, community services, and religious services that are held on site as well.
Yeah, no, and I think the board has heard loud and clear that this is a house of worship, and, there had been some questions coming in, if it isn't truly where a rabbi has services each, I'm Catholic, so, every Sunday we have house of worship we go to. But these ancillary uses make it a house of worship, and we can't delineate it. It falls all under the house of worship, and it's very important that the board understands that.
And our ordinance, I think, captures that as well. I just want to make sure as we're seeking the use variance, we're not putting them in a box for just the term of house of worship, which might be too constrictive here, so.
And I think Ms. Friedman also said, regardless, they do have services there. They have junior.
Sure.
Correct.
For our preschool, the camp, and the community.
Because you provided extra testimony, and Mr. Burr, I didn't forget about you, I do want to remind the public, if they want to ask more questions on the additional testimony, just raise your hand and I'll have you come up. Yes. If we could just get your name and address.
Ferrara. I live on 788 West Foothill.
I didn't hear your name.
Lisa Ferrara. Could you share a map of how the 3 acres and the 12 acres are divvied up, or?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, that's my only question for you. I just want to-
We have it on our screens, and hopefully it'll pop up on those screens as well. There we go. So I think the question was, your 3 acres, where is it going to lie? I think it's to the west.
I feel like I need a pointer somehow to show you. So the long, oh, he has a pointer. There you go.
Maybe we can zoom in a little bit as well. There we go.
Oop, it disappeared. It's not going to work? Oh, I don't mean to point a red dot in anyone's eye. I think that's...
Scroll down.
I think the original one you had up captures what they were asking.
Was where are the 3 acres delineated on
Yeah.
the overall property map?
So if that's our property right there where my little dot is, I don't know if you can see it, where the blue, looks like it's blue on the corner, so it forms its own little triangle. The property that we're looking at is connected parallel to our property. The other map was a better option. That first one that was up shows it perfectly clear. Where I feel like this one, there you go, perfect. So the triangle, that looks like it's right next to 287, that's the JCC where it currently exists. The 2 rectangles are the property that we're discussing. The part that we would get would be attached directly to our, yes, exactly, exactly. Does that answer your question? Okay, great.
Go back to the other view again, just to show where it is.
Sure. Can we scroll down?
Do you want me to reply to that? Because I believe what I'm looking at is what the, Mr. Forgione is looking at for the townhouses, and then our little piece of the property is the green part.
It sounds like you answered the question. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. All right. Mr. Burr, I didn't forget about you. I apologize.
So before we do that, sorry, Mr. Coakley, where did he go? So, Mr. Coakley, what we just looked at, is that in our package? Exactly rendered? I don't remember. I remember. Yeah.
Sent it over as an
Oh, okay.
Right, but that's not in our board package.
your
I
hard
just want to mark
copy
it as an
package.
exhibit, is what I'm getting at, right? So we're going to mark that as Exhibit A1.
Nope.
And would you just identify what that is?
We actually have this marked as Exhibit A4 already.
Okay, we can go with pre-marks. So A4 is, see, it's on the side, but what is it? How are we going to describe that?
So we have here 4 sheets in this A4 exhibit. Romanet 1 is this view of the 3 lots that are at issue here. We didn't look at Romanet 2 or Romanet 3. And Romanet 4 is the image that shows a zoomed-in picture of the lots 45 and 46 and shows where the townhomes will be, and also the portion to the left of that red line is the 3 acres that would be subdivided.
And is that, I'm sorry, is that sheet 3, you said?
So this is Exhibit A4, Romanet 4. You see in the lower left corner there are Romanet numbers.
Way too small to read that.
I do have hard copies as well, if you would like.
I would like a hard copy for our file, for
Yeah,
sure.
and any members of the public that would like a copy, by all means, let's get them one as well.
Leave one up here for the public. Chairman, we'll leave one up here for the public.
Thank you, Mr. Coakley.
Does Nancy have one for the file? We need to make sure the board file has one. Yeah. Nancy, if you would just mark it A4 with today's date, please. And I'm going to try and identify it just for the record, Mr. Coakley. So A4 is, consists of 4 sheets. First sheet is where the A4 is an aerial. Looks like the lots are identified with lot boundaries, right, for 3 lots. The second sheet just has lot boundaries for lot 45 and lot 46, again, an aerial. I will need one of you to tell me what the third sheet is here. Is that environmental constraints exhibit, okay, is the third sheet. And the fourth sheet is just a rendered site plan, right?
I think that's a good description.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we answered members of the public questions. We had one last professional I wanted to, oh, let's finish with the public and then we'll get to Mr. Burr. If we can just get your name and address, please.
Robert Kurz, 775 West Woodhill Road. I do have a question that's going to cover both sides, but I'll ask for the JCC first. As you're adding on more property, is there any intent of providing other access to your property? Because right now you only come out of one driveway.
No.
And the next question for JCC, where the house and the other are, I know you said you were not going to do pavement and stuff like that. Will you be bringing vehicles up to the house area? I mean, like on a stone lot?
Not cars, golf carts. We have a couple of golf carts that we use among the grounds.
Okay. And, you asked a question about the access. So right now, there's no intent of having access off of 206, like on a common driveway up the, everything?
No.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Mr. Burr.
Thank
Sorry.
you, Mr. Chairman. Just had two quick questions, I think, for Ms. Friedman. So the existing dwelling, you had testified earlier that that is not going to be used anymore as living space. That's going to be used for classrooms or for some of your programs?
Yes, no one's living there.
Nobody is
No.
going to be living there in the future either?
No. There's no plan, no.
Okay. And then Mr. Coakley indicated that if these D variances are approved, in the future, site plan and subdivision approval would be necessary for this merger. Do you envision the application being a joint application at that point in the future, or is that undetermined? Could they be split and proceed separately, or would they likely come through as a joint?
I knew he was going to.
Please, Mr. Cohen.
The intent with respect to the site plan and subdivision components, when they're presented, will be presented jointly with 821.
Very good.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Burr. Ms. Friedman, if you have nothing further, thank you very much. Have a good evening. Now, you told us he was number 4.
Singles hitter now.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr.
Excuse me, I'll
Michelle,
go.
what is your profession?
Oh, before we do that, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give to this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And your name, please?
Robert Moscello,
Thank you.
Moschello. Business address is 265 Main Street, Gladstone, New Jersey.
Thank you.
My license is in good standing with the state, and I've appeared before this board as an expert witness in the field of civil engineering.
All right, Mr. Michelle, good to see you again. This board accepts your qualifications. Please continue.
So I guess the first question is, what did you do to investigate this property before you did anything more?
Right, so let me go through, I have a series of exhibits I want to present here to the board. Actually, it was entered as Exhibit A4 for the record, so let's start off with going through the various imagery that I have to explain the property, explain the constraints on the property, and then we get into the actual application itself, is what we're asking for, use variance approval this evening. So we'll start off with, so I have this right record here, this is sheet. There we go. So for the record here, we have sheet, this is Roman numeral 1 in the exhibit package. It's entitled Neighborhood Aerial Exhibit. It's dated August 13th, 2024 for the record, and that's what's up on the screens here that you see in front of you and on the sides. What we're looking at here is the 2020 New Jersey State Aerial as the base mapping for this property and for the surrounding neighborhoods. Just want to point out some of the surrounding environs before we get into the site-specific details itself. So as you can see on the plan here, on the left-hand side of the plan, that's 287. That you see, or I'll say the west side of the plan with north being up on the screen, okay? On the east side of the plan, you have Route 202, 206 running in a north-south direction. You see the 202, 206 label there on the screen. To the north, we have West Foothill Road, which is accessed off of 202, 206. And to the south, we have Talamini Road, which has access off of 202, 206 as well, and that has a flyover over 287 or an overpass. You see here 3 properties that are outlined on here for the purposes of this application. Block 477, lots 45, 46, and 53. As Mrs. Freeman pointed out, lot 53 is the JCC property. That's that triangular shaped piece of property adjacent to Route 287. And if you look at the aerial imagery, you can see there on the property, you have access off the south of that property, off of Talamini Road, just on the bottom there where the pointer is. That's the main access drive that comes into the property. And you have a driveway coming in which accesses the parking lot and the building complexes that are on that site. And you can see it's a very developed property from looking at it. You have parking, you have multiple buildings, you've got tennis courts, basketball court, ball fields, all of those types of features that are on that property as of today. And then we also have, looking at the surrounding environs, we are in the R40 zone, the residential R40 zone. And basically, all of our property plus the JCC property and the properties to the north and south of our development is in the R40 zone. To the east of 202, 206, that's the R40A zone. Just to be specific, you see the dashed line that runs down 202, 206. That's the zone line that separates the R40 and the R40A zone. And just so, as you can see on the mapping, you have residential development both to the north and to the south, as well as on the east side of 202, 206, and at the corner of Foothill Road and Route 202, 206 is the Bridgewater Veterinary Hospital. That's there as well. And that site has access off of 202, 206. And that'll come into discussion when we talk about the site plan a little later on. So that's the overall environs of the surrounding neighborhood. When we go to the next slide, which is that Roman numeral 2 in your package, this is entitled Aerial Exhibit. Okay, and this is a little bit of a zoomed-in look at the properties themselves that are the subject of the development application this evening. So I've unhighlighted the JCC property to the left, and we're focusing on the 2 lots that are the subject of this application. And as Mr. Coakley pointed out, it is block 477, lots 45 and 46. And they are 2 separate lots. One is, lot 45 is 7.032 acres, and lot 46 is 7.884 acres. In total, those 2 lots combined, for the record, are 14.916 acres. Okay? There are existing improvements on the property, and as you can see from the aerial, this was kind of talked about already, the property has its main access off of 202, 206, right where the 202, 206 label is on the plan. It's a driveway that comes off of the existing highway. You come in there and it actually splits. You can go to the right to the existing farm stand that's on the property today. There's some parking there, gravel parking for that farm stand. And then if you go to the left, it's a little hard to see on the aerial, but there's a single lane driveway that goes up to the back part of the property where the rear portion has 2 existing dwellings, has a metal barn building and some additional storage buildings, as well as a pretty large gravel parking area that's also back there. You can see where those cars are parked on the northwestern portion of the property, if you're looking at the exhibit. And then you can see from looking at the imagery, the property is both wooded, more towards the middle and along the northern property line, as well as open grass fields on the southwestern side, as well as around the development of the house. And then in the front, where you have the farm stand, is also open fields as well. But it's generally wooded, and on the main portion of the site's generally wooded, and you can see that from the aerial. The existing lot coverage on the property, as it stands today, is approximately 1.59 acres, or about 11% of the overall lot coverage on the 2 lots combined together. And then, like I said, that consists of the driveway, the buildings, the gravel parking area, and so forth. As noted in the application, because these are 2 lots, and however they were created and put together many years ago, there are some cross easements to allow access to both lots over the existing driveway. For whatever purpose that's in place, those easements are there today. Ideally, if the application was ultimately approved and went through the site plan process, those easements would be extinguished and modified, extinguished and no longer would be needed for a townhouse development. But they do exist on the property today. So any questions on the existing layout before I go into the environmental constraints?
Just those easements in specific you were talking about, you don't know what they're for now?
They were called access easements, so there's one over that gravel parking area. So ideally, if someone had owned lot 46, they would have the ability to park on lot 45 if it was under separate ownership.
Okay.
That's how I would interpret it today.
Okay, thank you.
A question. So let's talk about the water feature on the property. Can you go over that?
I'm actually going to touch on that on the environmental constraints.
Fair enough.
Yep. That's actually a good segue into the next sheet, which is Roman numeral 3 in the set. This is the environmental constraints exhibit, also dated August 13th, 2024. This is basically a colorized version of the existing conditions plan that's in the site plan set that was submitted to the board. So this has a lot of existing information on it in terms of the property itself from an on-the-ground level type of condition here. So we'll talk about some of the various features that are on the property today. First off, again, we have our access off of 202, 206, which is still on the right-hand side of the plan. The driveway comes in there. The site is gentle to moderately sloping in terms of the topography, and the topography is on the site plans. It basically goes from an elevation of about 202 on the northwestern portion of the site, or the site closest to the JCC, and it slopes downward towards Route 202, 206 to about an elevation of about 138. So you have about 60, 65 feet of grade change across that site, which when you take that over 1,000 feet, it's gentle to moderately sloping. We've done our slope analysis on the property, and on the colored map here, you can see the slopes are outlined in a green color on the map on the screen, and we have identified that based on your slope categories within your ordinance, and you can generally see that for the most part, there's a pocket of steep slopes down towards Route 202, and they're not even that steep. They're in your 11 to 19% range, and there's a couple other little pockets of slopes around the property. You'll notice a darker green area slope towards the southern portion of the site, right in there. That's in your steeper category of 20 to 29%, but if you look at the topography, it's actually around it looks like a mound of dirt that may have been placed there, or a pile of dirt that was placed there at one time on the property. So in looking at that, it looks like it was actually man-made, but still nonetheless is identified as a slope, a steep slope on your category. So the slopes are sparse around the site, and we have done the hillside development calculation per your ordinance. Again, when you start off with the 14.91 acres of land that constitutes the two lots, when you take into account your steep slope, your hillside development ordinance calculations, the developable area of the overall property goes down to 14.45 acres of available land for development, and you use that to calculate your FAR, your lot coverage, and so forth. So you can see it's a little less than a half acre of reduction. So for the most part, from looking at those numbers, you don't have a lot of steep slopes on this property. In terms of the DEP regulated areas on the property, so you have three categories of the DEP regulations that we now deal with today. You have freshwater wetlands, state open waters, you have riparian zones, and then you also have floodplains. So we've actually gone to the DEP and gotten verification from them on the wetlands and the riparian zone on the property. So on the map that you see here, we've identified under our LOI, we've identified state open waters and ordinary resource value wetlands or ditches that exist on the property. So in looking at the property, and I'll go from west to east, so starting on the west, you've got that blue circle there. That is the existing pond that's on the property. It was designated as a state open water under the LOI. Doesn't have...
Designated as what?
A state open water.
What does that mean?
I mean, it's basically, have to put it backwards, it's waters of the state. It's regulated under the DEP that it's a water body that is protected under the wetland regulations.
So it's going to stay there?
Under the current plan, it's going to stay there, yes.
Okay, thank you.
But would you be able to develop it around it?
You could develop around it, yes. They have some requirements for a certain distance off the top of bank, but yes, you can develop around the state open water. It does not have a riparian zone. It does not have a floodplain, because basically it's a pond that was built on the property a number of years ago, more for aesthetics more than anything else. And so, but under the rules, it is regulated. So that pond's there, and that pond is going to end up, when we get into the discussion about what's going to be subdivided to the JCC, that pond will be on the JCC property. So then if we move over to the right side of the property, or the eastern side of the property, along Route 202, we have some additional constraints there. Now you have, in the bigger picture of things, you have a tributary to Peters Brook that runs along the west side of Route 202-206. That tributary drains down to Peters Brook. It also comes up onto our property, actually goes under Talamini, runs along the left side or the west side of 202-206, and then goes under a culvert right before the access driveway into the property. That culvert then takes that tributary on the Bridgewater Vet property and continues up under Foothill Road up into the mountains. Okay, that's the unnamed tributary to Peters Brook. That tributary is regulated under the state. It's greater than 50-acre drainage area. So What we've done for that tributary initially is, and it's shown here in blue, we've identified the riparian zone that's associated with it. So there's a 50-foot riparian zone as verified by the state, and it's shown in that red dashed line on the plan. It comes out off of that tributary, actually picks up a small ditch that's on the property, and it's outlined in red on the plan. That's a 50-foot riparian zone, verified by the state.
The pink or the orange?
Oh, the pink.
I just ask you a quick question while you were talking about 202. Does the property then go all the way out to 202, 206 then?
The property actually goes to the center line, but we counted the acreage to what would be ultimately might become a DOT dedication. I'm going to leave the DOT dedication to our traffic engineer because there's been some back and forth with the DOT, and sometimes now they're not taking right away as they used to. So I'd like to defer the whole DOT dedication discussion to our traffic engineer, but right now the lot line, in some aspects, does go to the center line of the road.
It does go there, okay.
I have a question for you. The houses, there are two houses there in the back, right? One of them will be demolished and the other one will stay.
That is correct. So
during construction, how do they have access to the one house that is going to stay? Because the roadway that goes in the back will be...
construction, there'll be nobody living there anymore. So it'll be ultimately at that point, if this were to go through the entire process, both use variance and then bifurcated use variance and then site plan approval, the existing home then would be turned over to the JCC and there'd be no more residents living in it. So access would then come from the JCC property, as Ms. Friedman pointed out, most likely by some type of a small trail for golf carts and the like to access the building.
Right now, that portion of the property, which is 3 acres, which is not part of JCC at present, right?
Correct.
So then the question would be, how is that 3-acre property being accessed until, of course, the two properties get combined, then it will have access through JCC. But up until that point, how does someone get into that 3 acres?
Well, again, if it were to go through approval and the 3 acres then becomes part of the so the lot becomes subdivided upon, we'll call it closing, for example. So if the board were to approve the application, there's a whole series of other steps that have to happen after that before the property actually closes and the developer can start construction on the property. At that time, the house will be vacant. So there'll be no reason for any resident to access the house. It'll then be turned over to the JCC, and they'll have the ability to access it from their property. The 3 acres will then become part of their property, and they'll be able to access it from there.
Okay.
So talking about the environmental constraints, we have over 50-foot riparian zone that's on the property that's now verified by the NJDEP, and we show that on the plan. One of the constraints that we have not fully verified yet, and this actually goes back to when we submitted for the wetlands LOI and the riparian zone verification about 2 years ago, the DEP was in the process of proposing the new flood hazard area rules, which changed all the flood elevations across the state. If we would have submitted at that time, the verification that they would have granted us would have been null and void with the new rules that were issued 6 to 9 months later. So we've looked at the stream on the property. We can attest to the fact that the floodplain will not impact the proposed development, but we will have to get that verified as part of the site plan process going forward with the DEP. And we are going to need a DEP permit in order to cross the ditch to access the site, and you'll see that on the site plan, as well as disturbing a portion of the riparian zone. So we have to go get that from the state anyway. So that would be something that we would do as part of the site plan approval process.
Now, Mr. Rochelle, I just got to ask you, because I feel like I own half of the veterinarian across the street with my dog. They did work on that tributary there, and they moved some land, they put in some pipes. The DEP regulates that and dictated that for that property, and I know this is a different parcel, but what if the DEP, during your processing for the permit, dictates that you have to move and put in pipes and culverts and things that the vet had to do? Well, how would that affect this application?
I can say that I worked on the vet application.
Awesome.
I did the,
Shocking.
I did
All
the
right.
site plan on that. That's probably going back
Well, I paid for
over
it.
10 years now.
I paid for it, all right.
So yeah, so I mean, again, we had to put underground storm drainage on that property for detention and so forth, and we had to design it in such a way that the building did not impact the floodplain. So that did
Are you
go
going to preemptively just kind of do this here, or?
Well, in this particular site, and I'll get to the stormwater when I talk about the site plans, we have to install a full stormwater management system on this property.
Right.
The intent is that where we're going to put the driveway, there's an existing pipe there now that takes drainage off of Route 202, 206. We're going to cross over that pipe. We have to extend it a little bit, and that'll be part of the stormwater portion of it, and the DOT portion as well. Because remember, 202, 206 is regulated by the state. So any improvements that we do to 202, 206 is going to be looked at by the state DOT as well as the state DEP. So we're going to get two different levels of stormwater review when we go down to the state.
Well, three,
And
because you're going to get Bridgewater.
as well,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Now I want to forget Mr. Burr.
Yeah.
So we'll have three different levels of stormwater review. And when I get into that, I'll talk about how we intend to manage that stormwater runoff with the site plan.
Well, I'm not going to ask you to talk about the stormwater management just yet, but I'm going to ask you, does the JCC will have its own plan in the future, and the other parcel will have its plan? Or are you designing for the entire almost 15 acres?
We're designing for the development that we're proposing. As we're being told, as you heard this evening from Mrs. Freeman, there's no proposed improvements to the JCC lot other than what I'm envisioning, some type of an access path for a car path. That, if we're going to do an access path, we will address that as part of the site plan application for the stormwater at that time for this particular lot. Because it has to be accounted for. It's going to be gravel. Now, there's gravel there today. They may elect to cut some of that back. They may want to leave it. So that'll have to be something we'll assess. But that'll be part of the final stormwater management analysis. And I'll talk about why we did the preliminary one this evening and how that impacts it. But that'll be addressed and looked at.
But that will be something you're doing jointly with the JCC.
That's correct.
And as we look at this site plan currently, where you're talking about the environmental constraints, the pond effectively becomes the JCC's pond?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yeah, the pond in the back, the pond outlined, yes. So again, when we talk about the constraints, I mean, that's really what we're looking at on the property. So we have the LOI and we have the riparian zone verified. We are going to have to verify the floodplain, and based on what we know of this area, how it's going to be delineated, we feel that it will be contained to that lower right-hand portion of the property, which is the regulated area within the riparian zone, and that'll be vetted by the DEP. And one of the reasons why you'll see the driveway where it is because we're putting it on the higher portion of the site in terms of access and grade as well. So that talks about, and lastly, besides the wetlands and the flood hazard area, we did do I'll call it a partial tree survey was done on the property. We didn't survey every tree, but what we did, and you can see it on your site plans, we surveyed the trees along the northern property line with West Foothill Road. We surveyed the trees along the southern property line with the residents on Talamini. And then we surveyed 3 boxes of representative samples of wooded areas in the middle portion of the site to get an idea of what the tree cover looks like on the property. And we have a separate calculation for tree replacement I'll get to later on in the application.
But if your application is successful, you'd pretty much have to clear cut all those wooded areas that exist on the property currently.
Within the limits of the development, we're all looking to try to maintain, you'll see from the site plan rendering, the wooded areas along the southern and northern property line, but the middle portion of the site, yes, will be clear cut for the development.
There are light green areas at the bottom, here and here. What are those? These areas.
I'll get to that on the site plan. Those are detention, those are stormwater management basins. Yep. All right, so moving on from the constraints, now to talk about the actual site plan application itself. So let's go to slide 4 in the A4 set. This is entitled Site Plan Rendering. It's dated August 13th, 2024. This was the image that was being referred to previously by Mrs. Friedman, and we were talking about where the subdivision line is and so forth. So this is the proposed application. Again, we're oriented with 202 on the right, the JCC on the left or the west. The overall tract is outlined in yellow. We don't have the middle dividing line anymore showing the existing lots on here because those now no longer exist under the proposed application, and we're looking at the overall tract here for the proposed development. So as Mr. Coakley pointed out, we're asking for the bifurcated use variance approval this evening with the different D variances that he mentioned. This is a 64-unit age-restricted townhouse development that we are proposing this evening. And there was some talk already about the subdivision aspect of this with the JCC. So before we get into the specifics of the site itself, let's just talk about the JCC subdivision for a moment, just to make sure everyone's clear on where that is and how it's shown on the property. So in looking at this map here, and Mr. Ryan, if you could just zoom in a little bit on the left-hand side, you'll see that there's a red line. You can just pan over to the left a little bit. That red line there that's on the plan, that red line represents the 3 acre subdivision of the property. So we're starting out with the 14.91 acres, and with the 3 acre subdivision, we're actually calling that lot 53 for purposes of lot designation right now, but we'll say remaining lands, which is to lot 53. It's 3.0 acres, and then that leaves us with 11.91 acres of development on the main portion of our site. Okay? So that red line represents the 3 acre subdivision, and then what's going to be left on that lot, if you can zoom in a little bit more to the left there on that plan, to the upper left of it, since we have it on the screen here. So you can see the blue shade is the pond. Just to the right of that is the existing home with the metal barn building that's adjacent to it. That's going to remain right there. Yep, that gray area, the light gray and the dark gray. And then, excuse me, to the north of that, there's an existing gravel area, which is a parking area right now. The intent is that will stay unless the JCC will modify that, but right now we're showing that as remaining. And then access will come from the JCC property to the west.
How many external parking spots are you going to provide?
Right now, it's a large gravel area, so there's no designated parking there, but you can see from the image, there's actually 6 vehicles parked there right now.
On the site that on your side of the line, on the red line, I see little dashes. I'm assuming those are parking spots.
Well, yes, we have visitor parking that we have on the site plan. So there's actually 38 visitor parking spaces.
How many?
38.
38.
Yep. And I'll get into the genesis of that with the parking calculation, but there's 38 spaces. And they're dispersed throughout the site. There's some parallel, there's some perpendicular, and I'll touch on that. So in terms of the site itself, we're going to propose our access on the northern portion of the site, on the northeastern side. It's actually in the upper right-hand side of the plan there. You can see that curved road coming off of 202, 206. We actually lined the access up with the driveway to the Bridgewater Vet site, because we know they have their own dedicated left turn lane coming in off of 202, 206. So we're also showing the same on our side to a certain extent. That still has to be, of course, worked out with DOT and everything, but the idea is to have a full-service driveway where you can have access to the site from both north or southbound 202, 206. So we're actually showing a divided roadway for RSIS purposes. It's divided for when you come into the first intersection. We have an 8-foot wide grass median and then 2 16-foot wide drive lanes that come into the first intersection when you get into the site. I know there was a comment in the fire official's memo about showing the fire truck access through the site. We'll certainly provide that to him as part of the site plan approval.
So that's going to be 40 feet wide then, the entrance?
16, 16, 32 plus 8 foot for the island, so it's 40 total. Yeah. We want to make sure we have adequate width for the fire truck to come in. I know Green Knoll has a articulated ladder truck and so forth, and it's right up the, so I want to make sure we have the right room for them to get in there into the site. And there's some details that still have to be worked out with the curb returns at 202 and so forth, which is a site plan item. But again, we show that driveway coming in there. And when you come into that first intersection, you can either make a right-hand turn and go down Road B or continue along to Road A, depending on which part of the site you would wish to access. Those roads are 24-foot wide in width, which is your RSIS compliant for a multifamily road width. And you'll see that on here we also have parallel parking spaces along Road A that are closer to 202, and we have perpendicular spaces that are in the back closer to the JCC lot for on-site visitor parking. We also have some spaces interspersed between the townhouse units as well in terms of parking. If you see on the screen there, just to the right of that H string of townhouses on the bottom, there's 2 spaces interspersed right under the Road A label. Yeah, right there on the plan. So we've interspersed parking, visitor parking throughout the site for visitors coming to the property. In terms of the parking for the development itself, we have what is required under your ordinance, or under the RSIS actually, and these are, for the record, we've noted them as 3-bedroom units for the record. I know there's some comments in the review letters asking to confirm the bedroom counts. Our parking calculation on the cover sheet notes a 3-bedroom unit, so they're all 3-bedroom units. And I'm going to show you some floor plans a little later on from the architecturals that were submitted to the board, but they're a combination of some units have a bedroom on the first floor and 2 bedrooms upstairs. Other units have all 3 bedrooms on the second floor, depending on your particular preference in terms of what you want to purchase. But again, they're all 3-bedroom units. So based upon 3-bedroom units, the parking requirements for the project, number 64 units, the parking factor is 2.4. You need 154 parking spaces for the project. All these units that we propose here are 2-car garage units with a two-car wide driveway. So under the RSIS, you get 3.5 parking spaces for the 2-car garage and driveway combination.
What's the average size of the townhouses?
I have the numbers. The first and second floor, about 2,200 square feet, I believe, of living space on the first and second floor.
Thank you.
Don't quote me on that.
You're saying combined?
First and second floor combined about 2,200. And they're a little bit different depending on the configuration inside, but that's about average.
No basements, slabs?
Oh, there are basements on these units, and there's actually an option for finished basements on these as well. And you'll see that when we get to the footprints, I'll show you that in more detail. But 2-story units, 2-car garages, two-car wide driveway, so we get the 3.5 parking space requirement for each unit. So when you factor that in, you end up with 224 garage and driveway parking spaces. That's a combined combination. Your ordinance requires 154. So clearly there's adequate parking on site based upon the RSIS requirements for the project. RSIS also requires that we provide visitor parking, which are those spaces that are dispersed throughout the site, whether they're parallel spaces or perpendicular spaces. The project would require 32 surface parking spaces. We have 38, so we have excess of 6 additional spaces for visitor parking on the site. There was a question about EV spaces for the project. The code does require that 15% of the parking spaces have to be make-ready. However, as of right now, we have not worked out with the developer in terms of how many units might have the ability to have, I shouldn't say have the ability, work out with the developer, them offering chargers in the units for cars themselves. So actually having a charger in your garage counts towards the EV parking requirement. So that's something we still have to work out. So if there's an option for chargers in the garages, that would count towards the number of parking spaces. If not, we'll have to provide some make-ready spaces on the site, and that's a detail we work out there in site plan. It's a state requirement, so we have to comply with it. So it's something we will work out in the details during site plan, but that will be provided, as part of the site plan.
Can I ask you a question? I remember when we did an age restricted a few years ago, I had it. It's an age restriction of 55 and over. Does that mean just the owner needs to be over 55? Can they live there with 2 college-age kids?
I believe so, but I probably want to defer that to our attorney just to confirm the exact statute.
Because I don't think that most people, if they can't have them, would need 3 bedrooms and 2,200 square feet. The idea is to downsize a little.
Well, again, that's...
Can we get a clarification on that?
Yeah, we'll check the statute on that. So, in terms of, I'll call it pedestrian access around the site. Again, this site has access off of 202, 206, but under the RSIS, we've proposed sidewalks on both sides of the road throughout the site. I know there were some comments about additional crosswalks, and we'll certainly can look at that in terms of site plan detail. We'll add some additional crosswalks around the property to make sure that you can safely get across from one side of the street to the other at key points around the site. But there's no sidewalks along 202, 206 in that area right now, but we'll bring sidewalks out to the intersection, and if DOT does something in the future and adds additional sidewalks, the connectivity will be there.
These are not private roads, right?
No, these are not, oh no, these are private roads. This is not a, I'll say a public road dedication or right-of-way. We're calling these as private roads.
So the snow removal and stuff is,
All handled by the association.
thank you.
Now, I will say that it has not been determined whether or not this would end up becoming a fee simple townhome subdivision where the townhouses would be on individual lots. That's something we'll work out as part of the site plan approval, but that doesn't affect the design of the project. It just would mean there'd be individual lots for the townhouses for a fee simple sale as opposed to maybe a condo type of unit here. That's a detail that we will have to work out, but again, that doesn't affect the layout of the project or the roads.
And these are not meant to be rental units.
These are for sale, age-restricted product.
Doesn't mean you can't rent it if you buy it.
In terms of site grading, I just want to touch on a few items related to site grading. We did have a grading plan that was submitted in the site plan set. So we showed the grades for the property on the set, and we did look into retaining walls and where they would be needed. As I mentioned, the site is gently to moderately sloping. This is not a steep site. We're not looking at retaining walls in the 20 to 30 foot range here to grade this property out. It's relatively flat. So really what we have is some retaining walls around the proposed detention basins for storage of runoff. They're in the 4 to 6, 7 foot range. We have a retaining wall in the northern portion of the site closer to West Foothill Road. That's in the 8 foot range. There might be some sections of some walls that are 9 to 10 foot at most, but we're not looking at we're not looking at major tiered walls here like you might see on certain sites that are 20, 25 foot high. The site again is gently sloping, so we don't really need a large amount of retaining walls. Ultimately, where we show the walls in the site plan, and we did have notes that have fencing for fall protection on those walls. There's guide rails shown in certain areas adjacent to the road, so that's been looked at already. That detail can be, further clarified in terms of the fence type and everything as part of site plan, but we do have fall protection and such shown around those retaining walls. Just in terms of cut fill, I know Mr. Burr mentioned that in his letter. Again, this is still, I'll call it, again, a preliminary grading plan to the extent that we haven't done all the site plan work yet. We haven't looked at maybe certain firming or screening options in certain areas, but generally speaking, we're actually in a little bit of an export right now, about 15 to 18,000 cubic yards of export. That hasn't taken into account final, I'll say, berming and things of that nature around the site. I just wanted to get that number on the record as of now. We have not, want to finalize that with a contractor and so forth. Those numbers. But there will be an export of dirt coming off the site. And we may look to adjust that number before we go to final site plan and make some adjustments to grading to do that. But nothing that would materially alter the overall site design in terms of disturbance limits and things of that nature.
Mr. Michelle, let me jump in. Why don't we take a break? It's 8:30. Let's take a 15-minute break. We'll come back at 8:45 and we'll finish.
I have a question about
Mrs. Amin has a question.
the lighting along the roads. Will you be providing pole lights or any of those kind of things? Or?
There will be lighting for the project, but because it's a residential project, it's going to be more muted as opposed to a commercial project, things along those lines. So the intent is, even though we haven't submitted a lighting plan, the intent is to have the lighting plan comply with your ordinance requirements for residential lighting. We anticipate the intersections and usually where you have those surface parking spaces. And then the rest of the lighting will be your typical residential lighting on the buildings themselves, at your doors, above your garages, things like that. No, we're not going to light the streets in addition to lighting the houses, except for just where we have parking. Because you want to have some light where the parking is.
Now, I also have on item 10 about electric vehicle parking. I have suggestion actually. Each unit should have its own receptacle, so that complies with all the requirements. So
Charging for?
For each unit, in the garage or outside the garage, you provide a outlet that allows you to plug in your electric vehicle. And that, yeah. That's very simple. And then that complies with all the requirements.
It might be required by code now on the outside, but I'm not the architect, so I can't.
Yeah.
Take a break. All right, 15 minutes. We'll see everyone back at 8:45. Thank you, Mr. Michelle.
Yeah, look, that's what you said.
Yeah, we've been through this before. I have.
Okay, it's 8:45, we're going to come back in session. Nancy, can we get a quick roll call, please? Nancy, can we get a roll call?
Chairman Foose?
Here.
Mr. Wiley?
Here.
Samin?
Here.
Mr. Fresco?
Here.
Mr. Bongiorno?
Here.
Mr. Gieske?
Here.
Mr. Seacat?
Here.
Mr. Kulak?
Here.
Mr. Gabbett?
Here.
All right, Mr. Maschello. Thank you.
Okay, so, we're talking about the site plan. I think this is a good time to jump right into the topic of stormwater management on the property. So, we're gonna stick with the exhibit A4 that was up on the board, which is the rendering, just so I can, just for informational purposes, but I'm gonna talk a little bit more about some of the stormwater details. There was submitted with the application, besides the conceptual grading plan that was in the site plan set that was submitted, there was a preliminary stormwater report that was also prepared for this project. It's not a full-on, total comprehensive report, but it's a preliminary report that looks at certain aspects of the stormwater management system on site. Before I get into that, just back up for a moment just to talk about what the project is classified under. So we are, under the rules, we are major stormwater development because we're more than a quarter acre of new impervious, an acre of disturbance. And we are also subject to the latest round of rules that were put in place now about a year ago, which is the new attenuation requirements under the state statute for stormwater management, which now requires us to look at not only current precipitation levels for year 2024, 2025, but also look at precipitation levels projected out to the year 2100, which is the new resiliency requirements of the state DEP for stormwater management. So we're required to not only design for current, but also design for this future 2100-year storm. It's 2100-year, 210, and 100-year storm events. And those events are quite larger than what we've dealt with under the current rules over the last number of years. Coupled with that, we also have to meet the green stormwater requirements, which, if you may recall in some other applications, your drainage areas to your water quality basins can be no more than 2.5 acres in size, where you have to treat your water quality requirements for the project before you might discharge into what we'll call a large-scale basin for all intensive purposes. On top of your attenuation requirements for those large storm events, you have water quality, which has to be treated either through the use of green infrastructure such as bioretention basins, infiltration, or mechanical or manufactured treatment device means on the property. And then lastly, you have recharge. Based on the soil characteristics of the site, you have to recharge or put water back into the ground as close to the point with which you put the impervious surfaces in order to meet your recharge requirements for your project. Because we are doing a bifurcated use variance application, we did not go into all the specifics of the stormwater design at this time. But what we did look at in terms of those three prongs, the attenuation, water quality, and recharge, we looked at the attenuation aspect of it. And we looked at the attenuation for that 2100-year storm event for the 210 and 100-year storm, the future precipitation, which basically for that 100-year storm, that's almost a 12-inch rain event over a 24-hour period, where the prior 100-year storm under current calculations is about 8 inches over a 24-hour period. So it's almost 50% greater than what we were required to design for just over a year ago. So in looking at that, we said, well, the worst case scenario is that 2100-year, 100-year storm. So we want to make sure that we can at least provide on the site plans the required storage and attenuation related to that storm event typically, if you can meet that storm event, you can meet the attenuation required with that, meeting your water quality, and then meeting your recharge, they basically will fall into place under the future design. Because that's the hardest thing to do to make that 2100-year storm work in terms of storage on your site. We also didn't look at recharge yet because that would require soil testing, which we will do at the appropriate time, but we've designed the basins as if we weren't recharging, which means they're actually conservatively designed for the most amount of water they'd have to hold, which means that under a recharge scenario, some of that water would go back into the ground if we were recharging during a storm event. We've done the calculations so far to exclude that recharge. So instead of that water going into the ground for the time being designed to be held in the basins and discharged slowly.
Michelle, you worked across the street. You can't tell us what the attenuation is going to be?
What was that?
You can't tell us anything about the soil? You did the work across the street.
Well, no, even though we did the work across the street, the rules require to do, 2 test pits per basin. So
Based on the work that you did across the street, tell us about the basins here. Are they appropriately sized?
well, that's where I was getting at, Mr. Chairman, was because we didn't look at the soil recharge yet, which actually allows you to make the basin slightly smaller. We've looked at it saying, well, take the recharge out of the question for right now, and let's just make the basins to the largest size we need to treat that 2100-year storm. And that's what we have here on the plan. This is the largest basins we would have.
Where is this plan? Like, what am I looking at?
So-
I have this ream of paper here that was in my packet that the members of the public certainly don't have. This is what makes me nervous as a board member, because I don't know what you're proposing. Where is it? Where can we point to?
If you-
Our professionals review it and read it and talk about it and make the neighbors feel safe, make people that live on the street feel safe.
So if you're looking at, again, like I said, this is a bifurcated application, but if you're looking at our conceptual grading plan,
Okay,
which,
but if it's so entwined in the decision-making process, and Mr. Michelle, you've been in front of the board so many times, and you do great work. You know what I'm gonna say before I say it. So with that said, how can you make members of the public and make this board make a safe decision, even in a bifurcated case? I don't think you can.
I think, Mr. Chairman, to your point, I think when you look at what we have here on the plan, and I'm referring to the conceptual grading plan that was submitted, and then those calculations.
Why don't we tell bifurcated applications, if you wanna do it, it's your right, but we tell them, we don't really prefer it as a board. This is the reason.
I understand what you're saying, but I think what we've submitted here, it shows the calculations demonstrate that we have.
You did so much work. Just submit it, just do it, do the perk test, go and do the soil test, so you can put it on the record, and this board can make a safe decision. I just don't know how you can ask a board in a bifurcated case on 64 townhouses, on one of the busiest roads in the township, actually, I'm gonna say probably the busiest road on a density basis, on acreage. And Mr. Coakley's gonna interrupt me, but how can we possibly make a safe decision that's not arbitrary and capricious? That a judge isn't gonna look at it and say, they had all the information? Mr. Coakley?
Rejoinder would be, this is the worst-case scenario. He's prepared these bases without getting any benefit of recharge. So, I mean, I don't think you get the information you're looking for on a site plan application either. I'm not sure you do. Maybe when the applicant goes to DEP and gets permits, that's so, but I'm not sure you get it in a regular application.
Your benefit, you did so much work. I don't know why you just don't do those things. I hear what you're saying, that you've sized this to the worst-case situation. Nonetheless, why don't you do the testing, so at least the board has the benefit of all this information? What if there is something crazy going on with this? We do have quarries in town. We do live on shale.
Can I just remind you of one thing? And that is, when we come back, whatever you get on a full site plan or subdivision application, you get again. And you get the ability to say, it doesn't pass the negative criteria test.
I don't really want to speak to that because, to be honest, we don't really do that many bifurcated cases. Yeah, and we did one on Chimney Rock Road, but they did 95% of the work. And I don't want to say you did at least 90% of the work here. I don't know why do it. I know there's a matter of expense. You've already done so much.
They have this statute for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is to try to keep costs under control. You have a nonprofit corporation here involved in this as well. You have 2 applications. It seems like it was drawn for this statute, this type of application. Let me ask you, how long would it take to do the test pits?
The test pits would probably involve a month of work to do that, to get the test pits done for this particular project.
Mr. Burr, is there a scenario where this year 2100 testing isn't enough? Because I certainly think there is. But I'm not an expert, and you are.
Mr. Chairman, you're raising some good points. Obviously, it's always easier for us to sit up here and tell the board and the public that we have the full picture.
Could you just tell Mr. Michello again and Mr. Coakley about what happened in our town on Route 22 and the dead bodies that washed up in Belleville that were sourced from, just give an overview about it, because I think it's worth talking about, because I have to bring it up every case.
I think they've heard us talk about it, but it's
Every case is unique to itself, so I want to put it on the
no,
record.
I'm just so it's something in the township and in the engineering department that we probably field the most of any questions or concerns from the public on a daily basis is drainage related issues. Ida was something we've never seen before, obviously. The township, just in some of the public infrastructure that we were able to get funding for, $3 million plus worth of damage. We had sanitary sewer trunk lines washed away. We had retaining walls supporting roads washed away that caused road closures. We had a number of people perish, unfortunately. So you're absolutely right, Mr. Chairman. This is something that we pay very close attention to on each and every application. And quite frankly, it's something I'm struggling with a little bit because I want to give Mr. Michello and the applicant the benefit of the doubt, because I appreciate on most bifurcated applications, we don't get anything in the way of a stormwater report. And we don't get, exactly, and we don't get the level of plans prepared to this extent on other applications. But, you know, on the flip side, if the board is asking me with 100% certainty that this is going to pass muster at the site plan phase, I really can't say that unless I have all of that information. So it's tricky.
Mr. Michello, I mean this with all due respect. I don't trust Trenton. I don't trust year 2100. I don't know what that means. That sounds like a total gimmicky Trenton word. I do trust you, and I trust Mr. Burr, and I think if you did a soil sample, it would certainly help me as one vote on the zoning board understand what we're dealing with here. Because year 2100 sounds like a gimmick. Even though Mr. Coakley says it's not, and I respect him as well, sir, I don't know what year 2100 means.
Well, I'm not relying on that. I'm relying on the fact that when we come in for site plan approval and subdivision approval, all of the requirements of that have to be met, and if they're not met, you have the right to turn it down. You're not bound by this approval in that respect. That's right in the statute. I mean, a lot of this is people have to plan. I mean, you can't plan if you don't know what your property can be used for. You know, we're all paralyzed.
Right, but
That's why I say that.
teach up front about safety.
Yeah, and we appreciate that, and that's why I'm saying, we stipulate that the ordinance allows you, if you feel that this is unsafe at the final application, that you can turn this application down. You have that right.
You say that after you present this grand design that we're going to help out the JCC. I don't want to be the jerk to turn this down, because I want to help the JCC. I want to help my community. And I'm telling you right now, I don't want to be that jerk. And why don't we come up with a plan where the zoning board doesn't have to be the bad guy? You're basically putting the zoning board in a position where we don't want to be. And I'm saying you can alleviate that and remove that trigger by giving us a little bit more information.
Well, maybe let's go on. I'll discuss it.
Let's discuss that, you know, to see what we can do in terms of that. But to your point, Mr. Chairman, and trying to get to where I was mentioning about the soil testing, let's say for argument's sake that, you know, we do the soil testing, there's no recharge on the property. It's what they call de-soil, and Mr. Burke heard that term before, in which case we wouldn't be able to infiltrate. You know, we'd have the storage, you know, outlined on the plan here that we need for those basins to function as the regulations intended to. So again, you know, we're looking at a plan here with basically 8 stormwater basins on the site. So you're taking what basically amounts to an 11-acre project, and you're taking even less than that 2.5-acre requirement per basin. We're actually doing even less than that to those basins based on the grading of the site and the way it's out and the way it drains towards 202, 206.
And this plan also incorporates the land that's been apportioned to the JCC?
Yes, this takes into account that what's going to come from that side of the property. So if they do any development there, we would have to account for that runoff that comes towards us, yes. And if that means we have to tweak a basin, as when we get into those final calculations, we certainly would do that. But this takes into account adding, you know, 8 basins to the site. We have 2 underground basins and 6 surface basins that provide stormwater management for the site the way it's designed right now. And I certainly understand your concerns about safety, and if the basins aren't designed properly, we're going to cause flooding on the culvert just south of 202, 206 by Talamini, and we certainly don't want to do that. The rules require us to meet the existing discharge points as the water leaves the site, and that's what we are designing to meet those standards. So that's something that we take very seriously with our stormwater calculations, and we're designing this to meet those standards that the state requires. And again, your engineer is also going to have to look at this closely as well as part of his review, and how he looks at his interpretation of what we've proposed here.
When you look at the adjacent residential properties to your developed, you've got this high-intensity development of 64 townhomes crammed into roughly 11 acres, and you're trying to design a water management plan. How are the neighbors affected by your plan and/or this development?
I think from a stormwater perspective, the way the runoff is coming here, we're actually taking the northern lots that are closer to West Foothill, sort of drain towards us, okay? The lots that are south of us, we currently, as of today, as of right now, no development on the property. The water from our site runs off onto their properties on the southern side. So by doing this development, we would actually reduce the runoff going towards those southern properties. I don't know if they have any drainage issues there today. I have not looked at that. I've not studied their properties, but by developing the site and putting those basins we have on the southern portion of the site behind those 16 units, if you could just pan up a little bit, Ryan, on that plan there. No, I'm sorry, pan down. I apologize. You'll see those 2 lighter shaded green areas on the plan. Those are stormwater basins that we're proposing behind the units.
How many trees are you removing from this property? Right now, they have the benefit of a lot of trees.
The site is wooded today, and we are going to remove the trees.
How many trees are you going to cut down?
So we are going, and this is based on an approximate calculation right now, because we only did, we surveyed the trees along the perimeter, like I mentioned, and we did representative samples inside the site.
The neighbors deserve to know how many trees you're going to clear cut.
You know, right now, we're looking at a tree removal number of about 560 trees, approximate trees, correct.
How far off could your error be? Could you be 50% wrong, 100% wrong?
Given the way we've done these calculations in the past, and you know, for on 1 acre boxes, it's usually, they could be an order of magnitude of 10, 20%.
Now, in other cases, we had an applicant where they cut down trees in error. I pulled up a satellite image, and I was able to assess a fine off the satellite image. Why can't you do the same thing? Why can't you pull up the sat and do the square footage and just count the trees?
Well, we surveyed 3 boxes on site, internal to the site. So if you go back and look at on our sheet 2 of 5 of the site plan set, we actually have 3 approximate limits of partial tree surveys. We did these smaller boxes internal to the site. So we did that to assess what the internal condition of the site would be, as opposed to surveying all the trees at this time.
Mr. Kulak, and I apologize for that. My microphone's been off.
That's okay.
But Mr. Kulak asked a question, how it will impact the neighbors. And right now, it's impacting them because there's approximately 585 existing trees that won't be there following the development. Is that correct, Mr. Michelle?
According to the current calculations, yes, that's correct.
All right, Mr. Kulak, I'm sorry.
That's okay. You can continue.
So, yes, to your point, Mr. Kulak, about the impacts to the runoff, because I thought that's what the question you were asking in terms of stormwater, is that by constructing those basins on the southern side of the property, we're going to cut off that runoff that's leading towards those southern properties. We're going to put it into our basins, and then we're going to discharge it at the required rates into the existing stream that's on the tributary that's on the property.
The presumption, based on your answer, is that the properties to the north are draining through the existing property today. Right. And that it is, I'm just going to ask this, is it likely then that that's all being absorbed because you have pretty much a natural site there? So none of that runoff is coming through to the neighbors to the south?
The way the calculations work is that there's certain absorption that happens under a wooded condition versus a lawn condition versus a pavement condition.
Yes.
So even though, yes, there's water coming off of those residential lots that comes onto our site, as it travels through our site, because it's wooded, you have less runoff as opposed to the proposed condition, which is why you have to provide detention and stormwater management. So yes, there may be some infiltration occurring there, which is why under the rules, we have to go in and do those recharge calculations, do that for the basins, provide the water quality, provide the attenuation, because you are putting pavement and lawn, which has a higher runoff value than you would a wooded area.
Yes.
So that's what the regulations require you to do the calculations. But by adding all these basins now, and we're picking up all this runoff, we're picking up some runoff that's coming onto our property from the upstream lots, and we're preventing runoff from going to the southern lots on the lower portion of our site. So there's a balance there that it's happening just by virtue of the development that's occurring here.
Understood.
I have a question. In the upper northwest corner, there's a detention basin?
Upper northwest.
To the right, sorry, northeast.
Northeast, yes, there's a couple basins to the northeast.
Okay, so is there a possibility that if those overflow and they overflow the stream, that the access to the development would be not accessible?
Given the elevations and the way the site's designed, if the stream were to overflow, let's just say, because the stream is south of that gradient is probably 6 to 8 to 10 feet higher. I don't see that flooding out that driveway. If it floods out that driveway, you're flooding out the entire 202, 206, and that storm is not just coming from our site. That's something completely different in terms of what's happening.
There's only one entrance and one exit out of the development. So if something should happen to that specific spot, these people would be in trouble.
Yeah, just based on the grading, it's higher than where the flooding would occur on the property. Which is why we placed it on the northern portion of the site. If we were to keep the driveway where the existing driveway is today, if you've visited, you've probably driven by the site, you know where that gravel driveway is, down closer to the stream. That driveway, that area is susceptible to flooding. So you don't want to have your access at that point there. So that's why we're moving it to the northern portion of the site. We know that access is high and dry compared to what's happening down by the culvert. And that's something we have to prove not only to the board with the calculations, but also to the DEP as well when we do the site plan.
So, and I know you haven't done all the testing yet, but all of the detention basins you're gonna have would account for 100-year flooding?
100-year flooding, correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Michello, where would the 65th unit go, hypothetically, on this plan?
65th unit?
Yeah.
I could fit a 65th unit.
Where would it go?
I could put it in the upper left-hand corner if with tweaking the road layout a little bit.
So the 65th unit would go in the northwest
Six
corner.
string units, yeah, northwest. I could maybe make that a 7-string fit one there.
Now, why do you think I asked that question?
I think you're asking it based on the density of the current project.
Thank you. That was it.
All right, so in terms of, that generally covers the stormwater management that we've submitted. Of course, the plan doesn't have the, excuse me, the piping network laid out yet, but that would be a function of, you know, the ultimate final design of the site plans. But the way the site's graded, all the water is going towards 202, 206, as it does today under existing conditions, as it would under proposed conditions. There was some questions about some other items to just briefly talk about. There was some questions about lighting. I mentioned that we would have lighting on the site adjacent to certain parking areas, and just at the intersections of the site. This would not be an overly lit site because it's a residential project. It would be a muted type of lighting that would comply with your ordinance. LED lights, down lighting, no up lighting, that would meet the ordinance requirements for lighting purposes.
Let me, can I just jump in and ask a question real fast? I'm sorry. You know, I'm looking at just before we leave the water. So I have the benefit of looking at this plan. You know, we keep talking about the neighbors and the neighbors runoff, but basically all the impervious coverage on all of these roofs, all 64 of these, are all getting piped into these main pipes that lead into your retention basins, right? I mean, that's what all these.
All the roofs are being picked up, and they're either going to be piped into underground storage basins or the surface basins. But correct, they are being directed.
They all lead there. Okay, and I'm glad you brought up. So the one in the middle, that's the underground one. Just run through that. You know, we've heard from you before, and these things, I know they come in all different shapes and sizes. And you're stating that you don't want to do the ground test on those. But what about the underground one? What's the story with that?
Well, we're proposing 2 underground basins right now, basically to take the roof runoff. And the assumption is.
Well, the roof runoff for the ones that are in that proximity.
Right, correct. Yeah, we take the middle section and go to there. And there's also one to the north of the 6th string of units by the entrance in the upper right hand corner.
Yep.
One up there as well.
Up right there.
The intent is, again, those would be designed as, their design right now is just straight up storage basins. So the amount of volume in them is based on the runoff coming from the roofs of the units with no infiltration.
Right.
Okay, so when we go out there and do the soil testing, not if, when we do the soil testing, okay, we would determine if the soils have the ability to infiltrate runoff. If they do, then we change those in the calculation from just straight up detention to infiltration. Right. And that's how they would be treated for the roof runoff.
Okay, so the underground, the one that's in the middle of the complex, that is what? That's grass with gravel?
So, yeah, from the surface, it would look like lawn. But underneath the ground, there would be a series of, and we haven't picked the final detail, whether we would do, I'll say, oval chambers, pipes, or the type of storage, plastic storage system. There's different options out there in the marketplace. But ultimately, they all give you a certain amount of storage volume that we have to meet from a stormwater runoff.
Exactly.
But it's completely underground. There'll be access hatches, you know, manholes.
And when it reaches its capacity, it then spills into one of the overflows.
One of the surface basins.
Surface basins,
Yeah.
right, okay.
Yeah. This is designed.
We don't know how big that one is, though, but it is, you're saying, though, you're testifying that
That footprint is general, that's the largest it could be.
the underground one in the center.
Footprints that are shown.
Okay.
Yeah, well, and I just can't read the dimensions, but it's at least probably it's at least 100 feet long by about 40 feet wide.
Right, okay, now, so you said, though, you testified to the fact that so you guys knew that the road wasn't in a good spot, right, because it flooded, so you moved it to the north, right, because
We moved it to north for 2 reasons. One, we know there's a regulated area there that we have to deal with, and from an access standpoint, that's not the most ideal. Secondarily, and you'll hear from our traffic engineer as well, we lined it up with the driveway with the vet because you have a better access there with the turn lanes and everything.
Good, yeah, that's where I was going, but that's also a higher grade there, though, right? I mean, that's
It's much higher, yeah.
right. So it seems like to me, just knowing the area well, that seems like a more dangerous place to put the road, right? If you put it south, which I know is not convenient for 64 units, but it would be safer because you'd have a much safer line of sight, though, there, right? Because you're at the bottom of the hill, not at the top of the hill. If you're making a left out of this complex going north, you have zero visibility on that, coming over that crest.
I'll have to just double check that, because we know that we have the driveway for the vet on the other side, and it's the same turn. If I'm making a left out of the vet, I have to be able to see up to past Foothill Road intersection.
Yeah.
But that's something we will make sure that, because we have to meet the DOT site distance requirement anyway for access. So that's something, and again, just anecdotally from being out there, we know there's a certain, you have a distance past, what was it, West Foothill Road up there, you could see from that intersection.
Yeah. Okay, so then, and just really quickly, so what you're saying is, so it makes sense in your world to have that road across from another driveway opposing? That actually somehow benefits traffic?
Yeah, and yes.
We'll wait for the traffic eye, obviously, but
Give testimony on that. as
you're saying that. Okay, fine. Just, I want to step back real quick, because I let it go before, but I wanted my chance to ask. You stated that you're trying to allow north and southbound access into this? That's what your plan is?
Currently designed. It's not a right-in, right-out. It's designed to have access from both the north and south into the site.
Right, without a slowdown lane?
We show on the plan, it's probably a little hard to see, but there's striping there now. There's supposed to be a left turn lane that mirrors the left turn lane for the vet on the other side of the intersection.
Right.
And again, I'll leave that up to our traffic engineer to elaborate on, but that's the intent there, to do that.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's it.
So, Mr. Chairman, I do want to just point out something on zoning really quick. 2 items related to zoning in regards to what was on the site plans. We did a calculation for floor area ratio for the overall project based on the square footages of the architecture of the units plus the finished basements. And there was a slight discrepancy in that number because we had the wrong basement number on our plans. So I just want to clarify that for the record, that the actual floor area ratio, and this is based on the hillside development ordinance or available land area, for the record, is 0.48 FAR. And that was noticed correctly when we gave that to the attorney. It was 0.48. The plans say 0.45. I'm sure that 0.48 for the record. And then lot coverage, also too, when we did the lot coverage calculation, we actually based it on the overall lot area, not the hillside development lot area. So it's actually, instead of 49.2%, it's actually 51.1% of lot coverage for this development as you see it right now.
And you agree with what's required, 18% on that?
18% per the zone.
And on the FAR, 0.15?
Yes, that's per the zoning.
Big difference, right?
It is a big difference, yes.
Mr. Michelle, can you just give the total square footage calculation for the .48 for the FAR?
Oh, yes. And the number that was noted incorrectly was the area of the, give me 1 second here, the area of the basement area on the units. So the basement area, so you have the chart correct, in terms of finished basements where it says optional on the chart, that should be 64,670 square feet.
And what does that bring the total to?
To 239,464 square feet.
Thank you.
And that's 0.48. And the lot coverage was 51.1. And I will say that from a lot coverage perspective, I'm sure there'll be some tweaks or to sidewalks and the like, so that number of 51.1 is probably going to vary slightly, which is why we weren't asking for that variance now, and it would be confirmed and locked in as part of site plan approval.
And these calculations do not include the 3 acres that's being ceded to the JCC.
That's correct. These are just based on the lot area for this particular project, excluding the deeded area to the right-of-way for the DOT. This is just what's left on the project with the 3 acres taken out for the JCC.
Can you confirm the lot size? Because the application said 15.3 acres, and your plans say 14.9.
So the acreage is, well, because what you have is you have a deeded area, an area, they call it, if I get the right terminology here, just for the record, we say to deed line. The deed line is the area that was plotted to almost the center line at 202, 206. So when you take the area of both existing lots, it's actually just over 15 acres. But when we're doing calculations and we're saying what's going to be left,
we're excluding that deed area, and we're going to the right-of-way line based on what the DOT maps say the right-of-way line is to be. So then you end up with 14.91 acres, because you take out that 0.2 or 0.3 acres of deeded area, which is the roadway, basically.
That's the difference just in the lot size diagram.
I'm sorry?
That's the difference in what was on the lot diagram.
That is correct, yes. That long, narrow rectangle along the highway.
Can I ask you a question? You look at the diagram there, and you see the townhouses. Where the road is there, that looks like an awful lot of the space of the 12 acres. Do you know how much that is, so I can figure out how much the townhouses are actually on?
I'm not sure I'm following the...
If you see where the road is coming in,
Right, the curve of the road coming in.
all that's a pretty big area there. How much of acreage is that taken? I'm just curious.
I'd have to calculate it. Maybe it's an acre, just roughly looking at it.
You have that for the next meeting, please?
Yeah, definitely figure that out. One other topic I just want to touch on this evening, and these plans were submitted to the board already, but I just want to point them out for the record, is the architectural drawings that were submitted for the units. I didn't talk much about the units other than noting that they're 3-bedroom units. We have these noted in strings of 4, 6, and 8 in terms of how they're laid out on the site plan. But I do just want to put on the record just some of the sheets that were submitted, and these were already submitted to the board, so I don't know if we have to enter them as separate exhibits or just reference them.
If they're part of our application, they're fine.
Right. So if Mr. Benson, if you can just pull up on the screen sheet SK 1.1. No, keep going. 1, 2, 4. 1.1, you said, right? SK 1.1. It's shrunken on the screen, sorry. Yeah, SK 1.1 is the 32-foot, 2-story townhomes perspectives, just to give the board a sense of what they would look like. If you just want to zoom into the upper right one there, would probably be good, just to give the board a sense of what the street view is of these units. Again, 2-story units with 2-car garage, going along the street there, and that is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's the 8-unit string, the 8-unit building string that's shown there. And there's 2 different types of elevations here. There's based on the finishing materials. So if you look at the architectural drawings, if you go to SK 1.2, which is the next sheet, you could see that you have your typical material types. If you zoom into one of those elevations, you can see that they're labeled on there with the various material types, the shingles, the siding, and colors and the like, for reference purposes for the board. And that's a rear view of the units that you see in there. If you go to the right, that's the side view of the side entry unit. If you go down to the lower, go down below that, that's the front view of the unit. That's a 4-string building there that you see in terms of its elevation. And then I know there were some questions about floor plans. In the submission set, there was at the back of the submission set, there was the floor plans for each of the different unit types, and they labeled the number of bedrooms. Some were master down or master on the first floor or owner suite, and then some had 3 bedrooms with the owner suite on the second floor. And they did call out optional finished basement, so we took that into account in terms of our FAR calculation. That was done. So, all told, I said before, 2,200 square feet. These are actually 2,600 square foot units for 3 of them, and one's actually 2,800 square foot in terms of the first floor and second floor living space. That doesn't count the finished basement in those numbers. I was off by a few hundred square feet there. But, so that, Mr. Chairman, concludes my direct testimony.
Mr. Michelle, I'm hung up on, I think Mr. Kulak asked the question about the driveway, maybe Mr. Bongiorno. On Frontier Road, we did a project, it was probably 10 years ago,
And we had a concern as a board that there was a safety issue on Frontier Road if something was to happen, and an EMS vehicle couldn't get up to that facility. I'm kind of hung up on this driveway. If something does happen there, and this is something that I think your traffic engineer should work with our police chief on. He has a pretty good database of accidents. I just recently saw one right in front of this entranceway. But nonetheless, if something happens to this driveway, upwards of 180 plus people are landlocked. I'm curious, our board attorney had an idea of potentially, some access road, really could just be a pathway with a chain link fence. That's what we did on Frontier Road, which is accessible via foothill. And only EMS is able to access that. But if that is a way that via the JCC, via Talamini and the access road at the JCC to come across that gravel road on the northwest corner of this property and maybe have another way to come in there. And you don't have to give an answer. It's just something I want to throw out that potentially this is one solution, and we did it already on Frontier Road.
I appreciate that, and we'll take that. I think it'll give us a chance to take that under consideration and talk to our traffic folks in the JCC about it, but we'll definitely take that under consideration, Mr. Chairman.
And I'm open to anywhere. It's just, that's the one that stands out to me. And, I do worry about safety first, and I told you that at the beginning of the meeting. And we want to make sure that EMS and fire and whoever can get to this facility in any condition. So, thank you.
I'm done with my direct, I'm sorry.
All right, let's open it up to questions, board questions.
Mr. Weidelli had asked a question earlier about the amount of space dedicated to the incoming roadway, and then adjacent to that incoming roadway are the retention basins and some of the proposed drainage solutions and so on. And you said you'd have to get back to us as to what that area itself might be calculated to be. Eyeballing it, it's not much smaller than the 3 acres dedicated to the JCC. So you have sort of parallel properties on either side. It looks a little bit smaller, just to be fair. And so we've got then the 64 units compressed into what I guess is 9 acres?
We're 11.9 right now, so 9 point, let's say 9.98. I say 10 acres because
Yeah, I just want to eyeball it so I have a better idea.
10 acres for
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Other questions?
Yeah, Mr. Michelle, we've gotten to know you, especially this year. I feel like I spent all summer with you, and you do amazing work. You really do. But I got to tell you, I think you outdid yourself with this one. You really did. There's a lot here, and I'm not going to ask you if it's financially viable to do with less or this or that, because I know that's not your job. But were there plans? Did you explore plans with less units? I mean, this is a very, very dense. The road looks tiny. It looks like a lot of water, just water retention, a little bit of road. It just seems like a lot.
we actually explored one or two conceptual ideas with actually more units.
Yeah, I'm not
They were
surprised.
actually smaller units. These are 2,600, 2,800 square foot units. We actually looked at 1,800 to 2,200 square foot units, and you end up with more units on the property.
Right.
Again, given the density of it and the size of the units, we settled on 64. Just the way the strings worked out and the way the units could be configured, that's how we ended up with the 64. With the larger unit.
Yeah, I think about when we worked together with the Starbucks pending application, and we spent so much time talking about landscaping and screening, and I realized this is not a final, but I struggle to see where you're going to add landscaping to this, with your final. Do you have some plan to help these folks understand that you're tearing down? I mean, it's a 560 tree count. I mean, that's almost like a
We
record.
spent 3 meetings with you and Starbucks, and we have spent our whole summer with you, and it's been enjoyable. And it's been very nice.
We'll be here in 2 weeks.
But Mr. Fresco's point is that, in the bifurcated meetings, it just feels rushed. It doesn't feel right, and I feel like we owe the neighbors more. I feel like we owe everybody more. And I don't know, Mr. Coakley does a lot of business in Bridgewater. He's a great attorney. I feel like he does better work. This isn't the best work. And that's why bifurcated applications stink, in my opinion.
Understood. I think if we take some of that into consideration, what we're hearing this evening, and let us think about some of that as well.
But just, we really spent a lot of time on the Starbucks, which is infinitely smaller than this, a fraction of the size. And
They put up more trees than more than they're tearing down. I mean, you guys are.
You have to take from a landscape perspective and understand that, yes, it is bifurcated, and I think you're gonna see what you see here in terms of landscaping right now. There's some more work to be done on it.
Mr. Michello, I feel like my decision is intertwined with the use variance, to quote our very skilled planner.
I sense you were gonna say that.
Okay.
Yeah, no further questions.
Anyone else on the board? Questions? Rich?
So Rob, we haven't spent a lot of time about the proposed subdivision line, right? And when you look at that line, you brought it to within about a foot of the barn and the house, right? And as you get from the north to south, as you come down towards that barn and house, the line actually jetties closer to the barn and the house. So is there a way that you could show us a proposed subdivision line where the JCC wouldn't have to trespass to maintain their property?
That's a great question when you look at that. And there was some, back and forth early on in terms of some of the structures, and in looking at the line, it does have to be adjusted. And that's something that I didn't mention earlier, and I should have mentioned it, because we provided the parking cutout there. I should say parking cutout. We didn't put parking in that area for a reason, and the agreement is 3 acres. So we have to look at slightly adjusting that, so we don't have a foot and a half between the building and the lot line.
It's just too close.
From a practicality standpoint of use, and that's something that has to be tweaked.
Because as you know, like the condo association could put a fence there, they would never be able to maintain that side of the building.
So that's why we have the cutout in the road, and that has to be adjusted.
Yeah.
But we have to maintain the 3 acres, so it's a little bit of a balance with the lot line.
They could amend the agreement.
I'm sorry.
Doesn't have to be 3 acres. It's just, however you get there, but it's just a little too tight. Yeah. Yep.
Board professionals, please.
While we're on that, Mr. Michelle, would that lot line adjustment potentially impact the FAR calculations, the impervious coverage calculations?
No, we're going to maintain, if I have to adjust, it's going to maintain the 3 acres.
Oh, there's no chance that it would make it over 3 acres in order to accommodate that?
As the way it was explained to me, 3 acres was part of the agreement, so I'm honoring those 3 acres.
Okay, but it could impact more dimensional requirements like setbacks and things like that?
Slightly in that area, yes. Okay. When we get to the actual C variances for the setbacks, yes. Because we're applying the R40 setbacks to the railroad track.
Correct. I just mean functionally the setbacks, whether or not we're looking at the requirements, the actual dimensions. While we're in that area as well, there is a sidewalk on the proposed townhouse site that literally, I think, is on the property line, right adjacent to those 5 parking spaces, which leaves no wiggle room whatsoever
We're going to have to, that's where we're going to have to make the adjustment in that area. We have to move this lot line over from that sidewalk a little bit and then shift it over. So we're going to go in a little bit on one side and come out a little bit by the building to balance that 3 acres out.
Okay. Okay. Do you know that, I don't know if the dimensions were included anywhere for the distance from some of these townhouse units to the retaining walls? So if you look at, the northwest corner where those 2 basins are, the 3A and 3, do you have an idea of the height of that retaining wall to the east of the most easternmost unit and
We're talking about the wall on the northern side, right?
Yeah, just along the basin number 3.
Base number 3, yeah, that wall's in the 8 to 9 foot range, I believe it is right now.
And do you know the distance between the townhouse wall and the retaining wall?
In a situation like that, we try to hold 10 feet, but I don't have a scale here, so I can't confirm that. Just to be able to construct footings and such for the building and not have the wall, impact the building. So I just need to confirm that dimension.
Okay. I know Mr. Fresco had brought up some of the landscaping. I have similar I guess, concerns or similar recommendations that I think additional landscaping should be provided, especially along the 202, 206 frontage. There's, I think some landscaping elsewhere proposed throughout the site, but virtually none along the frontage. And that includes the requirement for street trees, which have not been provided.
Understood. We can certainly look into that.
Additionally, you noted that the parking is being provided far in excess of what would be required, correct?
Yes, the actual unit parking required, yes.
There's proposed parallel spaces in the southeastern corner adjacent to where the riparian zone is, correct?
Yes.
Is there any reason, it appears actually that some of the development encroaches in that riparian zone. Can you just explain a little bit about what activities are allowed within that riparian area?
Yeah, we're gonna request a permit from the DEP to disturb that little section of the riparian zone there, to construct the parking and the curve of the road.
Is there any reason why those parallel spaces, especially adjacent to something environmentally sensitive, is required if you have an excess of parking elsewhere?
We were just looking, because we know that in the past on certain townhouse developments, there was always concern about having, extra additional parking spaces for visitors on the street. So while the RSIS requires 32, we worked out to have 38. So again, looking at the plan, I will say this: if there's an opportunity to make an adjustment and maybe take some of those parallel spaces and make them perpendicular, we can certainly look at that and try to minimize that impact there. But that's a good point that we can take a look at.
Okay, thank you.
And we're trying to balance it out across the site too, so we have some on the east and some on the west.
No, I understand. I was just, in particular, that area is sensitive to develop in it. It's one of the two-ish riparian zones on the site, and I think, as much sensitivity can be provided to that area is probably better.
Understood.
This probably isn't a question for you, but maybe you can answer or partially answer it. Was any attention as the site was being developed to provide the affordable housing units on site?
That conversation was not discussed in terms of a unit type for affordable. I wasn't given use this type of unit. It was looking at age-restricted in a townhouse environment.
So just generally looking at the number of units and then the product, the actual massing.
Not look to cite an affordable unit building on the site.
Okay, thank you. And was there any kind of exploration of providing any on-site amenities for the units? Any gathering areas, anything besides sidewalks, essentially?
I haven't looked at maybe some additional simple amenity area, like maybe some, landscaped garden areas, or maybe some little outdoor gathering spaces. We haven't gotten to that level yet. We didn't look at doing any type of clubhouse or pool. Given the number of units here, it really didn't lend itself to something of that nature. But there might be an opportunity to identify one or two areas on site where there could be some outdoor gathering space that might be beneficial to the residents.
Is there any space that I'm having trouble identifying somewhere that would probably warrant an amenity, a gathering space? Is there anywhere you can point me to that would probably be a likely location for that?
I'm thinking maybe in the northwest portion of the site, or there might be some area down towards the southeast between the edge of the road and the riparian buffer itself. We have a little bit of area in there. That's kind of even though we have a retaining wall, we can modify the retaining wall location to make some area there as well. In two places, just looking right now, I may be able to identify another spot, but those two areas.
Okay, I think that the site has, shown a significant accommodation to make space for the units, and I would highly recommend that other on-site amenities that cater to these units and lower any kind of traffic in and out of the site would be recommended, and to find some room for other things on the site besides the units.
Do we have any feel for Law Farms? I live in Martinsville, and this kind of reminds me of that in some ways, but they have a pool, they have a clubhouse, they have lots of affordable housing units. I mean, are they 200 units? Are they 150 units?
The Law Farm development?
Yeah.
120 units, I believe, and I think they have about 20 affordable units.
And they have a pool and a clubhouse and a rec.
Pool, clubhouse, an outdoor area, I believe. My brother-in-law lives there.
Oh, okay, good. Good. All right, thank you. Mr. Burr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Rob, back to the topic of the proposed subdivision line. As you take a look at potentially making some adjustments, keep in mind, I think there's a provision in the ordinance that requires parking lots and driveways to be at least 10 feet from a property line. So take a look at that. Unless you're going to be seeking relief from that, just keep that in mind, because I think certainly the one area that Catherine mentioned gets pretty close to that. So I don't know if you're going to be compliant with that or not. You know, as far as some of the landscape buffering and this kind of tailors into the stormwater management. You know, I'm noticing the two proposed basins on the southerly property line, and then the small basin to the northeasterly corner of the site. The grading is right up against the property line, which tells me we're going to be taking existing trees down, which tells me there's not going to be room to reestablish a buffer. And I do believe there are certain landscape buffer requirements at play here, given the adjacent residential uses. So how that all goes into the constructability of this project, those are three concerns I have as far as the location of those basins. I know you testified that the way you've drawn the basins are likely oversized, but with some of the questions we're hearing from the board and certainly some of my concerns from earlier, we got to make sure that this thing is constructible the way it's laid out. So that's something certainly. Along the same lines, the two basins at the southerly property line have retaining walls around them. I believe there's language in the ordinance that states that any wall above 48 inches is considered a structure. So I want you to take a look at that as well, because I don't know what the height of the walls are, but in my mind, that tells me the walls would have to comply with at least the accessory structure setback distances, which I think are 20 feet. So again, take a look at that, because I think those are some of the questions that we need to get resolved here. I don't know if you have any thoughts at this point, but, you know, again, right. Right.
So, Bill, you're saying that a 36-inch wall is treated than a 40?
The ordinance says anything below 48 inches is not a structure. Anything above 48 inches for a retaining wall is a structure. Right. I only mention it because there's a few walls that get pretty close to the property lines. I want to make sure that's not going to be an issue. I know your design just included doing some of the sizing or volume calculations to make sure that, you know, you could attenuate these larger storms. You didn't do water quality. You haven't done anything with the recharge, we heard. You haven't done anything with soil testing. But as far as the layout of what I'll say, the conveyance system, the piping on the site, have you looked at that? Are you comfortable with the location of the basins that this can drain properly from a gravity perspective?
We looked at the basin locations, and on our proposed drainage area map, we at least anticipated the drainage area at each of those basins. We had to size that for the routing. So
right.
Yes, while we haven't designed the pipes yet, we know where they're going to go.
Okay.
And as I'm sure you're seeing with a lot of these projects where we have a lot of basins, the amount of pipes that you end up on site now are 20 to 50% more than you might have had 10, 15 years ago, because we're having to route water in a lot of different directions to make it work on all these projects. Not just this project, but we're seeing with every project with the DEP now, that with the new rules, that we have a lot of pipes that we have to deal with. But yeah, we've looked into the aspect of where to take it and how we're gonna pipe it around.
Okay. The lot coverage, you clarified coverage is now at 51.1%. Does that include, I think, I saw a note, and maybe on the site plan sheet, but does that include the optional patios on the back of the dwellings, do you know?
I'll have to check the
Okay.
numbers.
I want to make sure that 51.1 is the right number.
Well, no, we have a patio number in here of 7,681 square feet, so it says proposed patios are optional, meaning it's counted for. But
It's accounted for, but they're optional.
Right.
Okay.
So they may not build them, but I haven't seen a developer yet who has built a product without having a patio or a deck on the back of a townhouse unit, so even though
Right.
they're optional, even if it's a deck, it can still count under your coverage requirement, if it's close to the ground.
It depends what's under the deck. As long as it's not covered, as long as there's earth underneath the deck, it's technically not coverage, but I get it. Hillside Development Ordinance. You took that into account when you ran your calculations. You had updated numbers for FAR and lot coverage as a result of that. Are there any 30+% slopes on this property? I forget.
Bear with me one second.
Yep.
There are. The 30% and greater slope is actually that, if you can go back, Ryan, to the environmental constraints plan, it's actually that area adjacent to the, what I call there's some type of a pile of material that was placed there at one time.
That's that green.
Green area on the
that
bottom,
green area.
of the plan, yeah. That is the 30% and greater. There's 2,884 square feet of it on site.
And where is that area in relation to your proposed plan? Is it near small-scale basin number 7? What I'm getting at is, are you going to disturb the 30% slopes, or are you going to work around that with your plan?
Well, we were disturbing that 30% slope, because in looking at it, it was, built as part of something that was done on the property years ago. So we were gonna take that slope out.
And is that called out as future relief that would be sought?
I'd have to check. I don't know if we went that far yet with all the relief.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not been accounted for yet in the relief numbers. And again, those were just informational for the bulks until we're to come back in for the rest of them.
Based on your knowledge of the site and the way this lays out, in your opinion, is there a way to avoid, regardless if they were man-made or not, is there a way to avoid disturbing those slopes? Or you'd have to take a look?
I mean, I have to take a look, in terms of what we have over there, because it's the basin that impacts them.
Okay. Let me see what else I have here. The driveways to each of the townhouses, I think your plan shows a little over 20 feet?
Yes.
That's from the back side of the proposed sidewalk, correct?
That is correct.
And that's sufficient length, in your opinion, for a driveway for a use like this?
Yeah, for a townhouse use like this, that 20-foot minimum is sufficient. We do have, because you staggered, the units are slightly staggered by 2 feet. Some are 22.
Okay.
Some are 20.
And you wouldn't have a scenario where a vehicle would be hanging over the sidewalk then?
Not your typical, your typical parking spaces are 9 by 18, so we're giving 20 feet here. So we shouldn't have that scenario, shouldn't have that situation.
Okay. And you testified earlier, you saw the fire official's memo?
Yes.
And he had raised some questions about some of the turning radii you're going to check. I think he had asked you to check for the green knoll ladder truck. You'll take a look at that and make sure that works.
Yeah, and we have 30-foot intersection radiuses around the site at the main intersection, so we shouldn't have any issues, but we'll double check it.
Okay. For sanitary sewer, I know, again, you haven't delved into the site plan aspect of this yet, but have you had any conversations with SRVSA as far as capacity and can they accept this project?
We have not spoken to SRVSA yet.
Okay.
We know it's in the sewer service area.
Okay.
So, again, knowing SRVSA and their current capacity limits, they're not at capacity in terms of allocation, but that's something that would have to be done because of the number of units here, 64 units. We are over the 8,000 gallons per day flow, I think, on the calculation, so we need a TWA permit, so we'll need the township's endorsement, we'll need SRVSA's endorsement, and for that application to go into the, into the state. Now, there's a trunk line right into a 2206, so again, we would anticipate tying into that line that's there.
Last question I have, back to the DP issue. You testified about, I think you said you have a valid LOI for the wetlands?
Valid LOI for the wetlands.
You have flood hazard verification.
For the riparian zone only.
Oh, just for riparian?
Yes.
The flood hazard is what you're going to seek?
Correct.
Based on the new flood rules?
Correct.
Okay. The permits that you envision needing, are they permits that you're confident you're going to be able to obtain based on the current layout and the disturbance that's being proposed in those regulated areas?
Yes, for the little bit of the riparian zone disturbance that Ms. Saramon pointed out already, even if we make a tweak and adjustment to that, I'm comfortable that we meet the requirements under the riparian zone disturbance chart in the DEP manual for the disturbance. And then for the verification, for the flood hazard area, based on what we understand the flood hazard area is, we've located the driveway and the basins, far enough away from that it won't impact the basins or the roadway.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Bill. Open it up to members of the public that have questions on Mr. Moshello's testimony. Come on down. Mr. Kerr, right?
I'm going to ask this question only because my neighbor's here too.
All right.
Have you ever tried to pull out of West Foothill Road, go north anytime during rush hour traffic?
West Foothill Road, I can't say that I have.
Try it. Okay, try it. Next question I have, and I don't know whether he can answer it or whether it's the traffic planning. Is there anything planned for if they were to widen 202, 206? Because I know it would appear it would cut into your retention basins.
I'll have to defer to our traffic engineer from what the state would
Yeah.
require.
All right, and the other question you probably can't answer is, I was here before the board when the mosque was in the planning stages, and at that time, there was, although the board could not confirm it, it was.
I don't think we heard the mosque case. That was planning board.
Well,
All right. I don't want anything to do with that.
One of the things was that there was going to be a synchronization of the Talamini Road and a traffic light put in at Foothill and West Foothill. I don't know whether that was still in the planning, and you're smiling because you've heard something.
I've heard rumors over the years
Yeah,
about
that's
a
what I'm
traffic
saying.
light, but no one, we don't, yeah.
It's never come through yet, okay.
No, I don't know. I don't know.
But do you take that into account when you're making your planning?
That's a question for our traffic engineer to
That's right.
look at.
Thank you.
Please, come on down.
Jeanette England site, 812 Summit Ridge Drive. Just have a couple questions. NJ.com online today said from the developer, the Bowman Consulting Group, are you familiar with those?
That's our traffic engineer.
Okay. They said the development will generate only slightly more traffic during the weekday peak hours than the existing farm stand. That's kind of amazing. I
Ma'am,
rode by the farm stand.
Again, we're just looking for questions about what he testified to, and he didn't testify about traffic. Their next, or one of their next witnesses will testify about traffic in detail.
With less traffic.
He can't testify until he's sworn
Yeah.
He hasn't spoken yet. So I
And you
suspect,
can ask him when he testifies.
I suspect NewJersey.com probably contacted someone in our land use office and got a copy of the report.
And is the architect who designed the buildings here? Or do I have?
No, he's not, but I have the information for the architecturals if you want to ask a question. Let me
Okay.
see if I can answer it for you.
Just from looking at the building, it looked like, you look at the front of the house, and it's one big garage door. There's no front windows, and you say, oh, this is a place for cars to live, where the people live. The people live behind the door, the cars, or they live upstairs from the cars. And I think Bridgewater can do better than that. Unless it's very, very low-cost housing. I mean, if it's 100,000, maybe. But I don't think they're going to go for
So a question maybe I heard, Mr. Michello, will these be priced around $100,000? So questioning his testimony, Mr. Michello, are these units going to be priced around $100,000?
Probably say with certainty they will not be.
Okay. So I'm just trying to get a question that,
who designed the entire front of the building to be a garage door?
Well,
That's all.
you have to think about it. These units are a certain width, and the two-car garage doors, because you have a two-car garage. Now, we show a single door here. I'm not saying that the architect, when they go to final design, may make two doors instead of one door. You know, in terms of the look on the front of the building, but you have a 26 or 28 or 30-foot wide unit that
I
you need to have a
understand.
two-car garage to be able to
If you
park your
need
car.
to have that many units jammed in there, right? Yeah,
People have to park their cars in the garage.
and they have to live behind the cars. Okay, thank you.
hi there, just need your name and address, please.
Lori Magliaro, 771 Foothill Road West. I have a question. The picture, can you show a straight-on picture of the 8 rows? Like, I noticed the picture is of the 4 is straight.
Yeah, I call it a perspective. I think. Yeah. This was the 4 unit. I think there was it was submitted with the set, one of the SK drawings. The 8 unit, I'm sorry, it was the 8 unit string going across.
This one?
That's a perspective. He's got to go to the other sheet. I don't know if it's up or down, Ryan. 4. That's the 6. We'll get there. There we go, that's the 8.
You don't have it in the context of the whole.
No, that's just, we're just looking at the front view of the 8 units. Correct. It's not a rendering of the development. It's a rendering of the, it's a front view of the units, elevation.
Okay. Do you have a back view?
The next page.
Yeah, next, thank you. Deck patio. Looking at a patio, yeah. Patio's on grade, yeah. And we've accounted for that in the calculation. But yes, there is an option for a patio.
And these are 3-bedroom, full basement.
3-bedroom, full basement, option for a finished basement, for 3/4 of the basement.
And miss, if you could just speak into the microphone so people at home can hear you.
And it's 55 and older, but you cannot confirm if that means they can have children there or not.
Well, the attorney can confirm the exact statute, but the statute, there's a requirement statute that says you can only have school-age children 2 months out of the year or something, up to a certain age, if the college-age student comes back. But the attorney can confirm the exact state language.
Okay. It's just my opinion that it's way too many people. They don't have a clubhouse, they don't have a pool, they don't have anything.
Okay, but testimony will be later. Right now, it's just questions.
Okay, so the only other question I had that I don't know if it's for you is it possible to have single families here, or is this just like this because this is what you're representing?
This is what we're proposing.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Foos, may I ask one more question?
Sure, sure.
And it's just a logistical question. Will the architect be appearing to testify at a subsequent hearing? I think that it might be helpful. I'm just saying for a future hearing, maybe. I'm just requesting it.
So that's a no, Mr. Coakley?
I don't see the point.
Your case, your application.
Okay. So, any more questions of him? Of this?
Come on down. We're approaching 10 o'clock. You can be brief.
788 West Foothill.
I'm sorry, say your name again?
Lisa Ferrara.
Thank you.
788 West Foothill. So this is my backyard. So one question I have, again, it's all very wooded, right? It's beautiful trees back there, and there's a ton of wildlife, right? There's deer, there's foxes, there's all kinds of wildlife sitting in my backyard all day. And where are they going to go?
Again, the EIS that was, I think, I'll say CIS. You have to submit an EIS that deals with the environmental impacts of what's happening with the project. But again, that's something that as an engineer, I'm not qualified to answer the wildlife question about where they ultimately go.
Yeah, I just know that I've seen the trees dwindle from the mosque and the temple and everything, and yeah. Okay, so that's an open question. Again, my house is to the north, and the water drains from my house. So first, I get water in my basement. I've just put a second sump pump in my basement, and it drains, like you said, towards
us, yes.
Yes, and you mentioned that you're going to put a retaining wall.
We're going to put a retaining wall between, I'm not sure which house yours is here, but again.
The third one from the street. So I'm 788. So you have one on the corner, then one, and then me.
Probably yours right there, which is lot 42 for the record. So yeah, we're going to propose a retaining wall here. There's going to be drainage at the base of that wall that we're going to pick up any runoff that comes onto our property and put it into one of our stormwater basins.
It doesn't have gutters.
There's a wall where right now my water is currently running through.
There will be a wall where it'll either be collected on top of the wall and then discharged into one of our basins, or we'll collect it on the bottom. We're not blocking the water coming from your property because you're higher than us. So the grade's coming across, the wall's going down. We're lower than your property.
Okay, I'm just mentioning that there is a lot of water problems in this area. I know half my neighbors who have had tons of water in their basement, and you mentioned there's not a lot of pitch, but there is a lot of pitch. I can tell you that there's a lot in my backyard, so.
Understood.
I guess we're talking about the traffic. We'll talk to the traffic guy, but I can tell you that I am almost rear-ended once a week trying to turn left onto my street. There's no turning lane to go left, right? So,
Ms. Ferrara, again, traffic questions will be for the traffic engineer.
okay, well then I will save that then. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, it's 10:02. We're going to wrap up. Mr. Coakley.
Schedule?
Sure.
So, yeah, we are willing to do soil work, and we would anticipate that we'd like to keep this case going. We have two witnesses that we haven't brought on tonight, the traffic engineer and also the planner.
Speaking of traffic, Mr. Coakley, I'm going to rope in a board traffic expert. We are using Mr. Fissinger in Starbucks, and I suspect, based on his availability, he will be who the board selects to be there that night for us.
Okay. So I guess we'd like to schedule a date where we could have the traffic expert and the planner.
We've got the boss here. We're very lucky. Nancy, what are your thoughts here for a date in the future for 8/21? Yes. Yes, so we'll do that tomorrow. Hopefully he's available. Yep. Starbucks is our next meeting.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, we can't hear, and the recorder can't.
Okay. Do we have a microphone for you? Thank you.
So 8:27 is Starbucks continuance?
Yes. So 8:27 is Starbucks. That's our next meeting.
September 10th, we have Somerset Properties, I believe.
Yep.
And then we have 2 residential applications on September 24th.
And we have a mausoleum case as well.
We have, yes, I believe that's already scheduled for 10/8.
Okay, and we also have all the cases that we briefed on at the front of this meeting, CX Towers, et cetera. So based on that, could we give Mr. Coakley an approximate date?
10/22.
10/22, Mr. Coakley.
Okay, so we'll have all of our witnesses available that day, the three witnesses. You know, again, I would just like to note that, you know, it's sort of the old adage, perfection is the enemy of good. There is a good here, but we can also destroy the good. We want to comply with safety evidence, because that's very important to all of us, and we will present stormwater testimony and evidence that I hope will assure you.
Mr. Coakley, I say that to my children all the time. Perfection is the enemy of progress, I think is the quote. I don't know who deserves credit for that, but I think Mr. Burr's statement about the retention basins and where they lie relative to the neighboring property, and you can't even landscape on a lot of those. So
We'll look at things.
when it comes to safety, unfortunately, we do need perfection.
Right.
And other things I do agree with you on, that it can
Not
be the enemy of
disagreeing with that.
progress.
Not disagreeing with that.
Thank you, sir. Good
Okay,
night.
thank you.
All right, so, want to do it or me?
You do it.
Okay, so for purposes of, for the public, this meeting is being adjourned this evening. It will continue on October 22nd in this room at 7 PM, and there'll be no further notices from the applicant.
And 2
Thank you,
weeks from
Mr.
tonight,
Owen.
we have Starbucks, 7 PM in this room. Hope you all can make it. And with that said, if there's no other board business, I motion to adjourn, please.
I move.
Mr. Waddell and Mr. Bongiorno. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Members of the public that were here. If the date changes, you have to check with the land use office, but every other Tuesday before we meet, around Friday, an agenda comes out. It goes